Chapter 298. The 10,000-foot-long blade beam fell. Ah! In the blinding light, a shrill scream shook the heavens and the earth. Looking at the distorted sovereign of the eventide in the blade beam and hearing his increasingly weak cries, the cultivators who witnessed this scene instinctively shuddered. They could not imagine what kind of torment the sovereign of the eventide was going through at this moment. Finally, the sovereign of the eventide's voice completely disappeared. Of course, his figure disappeared along with it. Dead. The sovereign of the eventide was killed. His physical body and divine soul were destroyed. 13 mighty figures and a divine king were all killed by him. After seeing it with my own eyes, I'm beginning to believe the rumors. Boss Chu can really kill the emperor corpse. I wonder what the relationship between the Jiang family and Boss Chu is? They actually managed to invite such a big shot. Yes, if not for Boss Chu's help, the divine king of the Jiang family would have suffered an unimaginable fate. The cultivators looked at Chu Bei, who was playing with the yin-yang sword above the underground palace. They instinctively swallowed their saliva, and their eyes were filled with fear. Thank you, Boss Chu, for saving the Jiang family from danger. On the battlefield, the Jiang family head immediately stepped forward and led a group of Jiang family cultivators to bow deeply to Chu Bei. Divine King Jiang Taishu did not speak, but cupped his fists at Chu Bei across the void. Compared to before, there was more respect in his eyes. Then, with a gloomy expression, his body swayed as he walked toward the dragon transformation pool with each step. Gradually, his eyes were bloodshot. He lifted Fairy Rosy Cloud with trembling hands and knelt on the ground with a thud. Heavens, why did you separate me from Rosy Cloud? Jiang Taishu roared sorrowfully at the sky. His roar shook the heavens and earth and resounded throughout the divine city. It was filled with intense resentment and hatred. The Jiang family cultivators, Duanda, Yifan, and the others landed beside the dragon transformation pool. No one made a sound. They just looked at Jiang Taishu quietly with pity in their eyes. They had not seen each other for 4,000 years, but when they met again, they were separated by yin and yang. Jiang Taishu was howling in grief, cursing the unfairness of the heavens. His howl was mournful and shrill. Boss, this old man is so pitiful. Do you have a way to save Fairy Rosy Cloud? Ji Ziyue widened her eyes and looked at Chu Bei. Chu Bei didn't say anything. He just nodded calmly. The heaven-opening axe was one of the top 10 divine weapons of the untainted land. It had the power to create the world. Although he couldn't unleash the full power of the heaven-splitting axe in his hands, he still had to rely on the power that the heaven-splitting axe bestowed upon him. However, even so, he could still use the heaven-splitting axe to reform and revive the souls that had dissipated within 3 days. At this moment, when Jiang Taishu saw Chu Bei nod his head, he suddenly stopped howling. After slowly putting down Fairy Rosy Cloud, he knelt down in front of Chu Bei with tears in his eyes. Boss Chu, if you have a way to save Kai Yun, please tell me. Even if you want to go to the 9 levels of underground, I can go there. Even if you want my life, as long as you can save Kai Yun. After saying that, Jiang Taishu didn't care about his status at all. He also didn't care about the juniors around him. He kowtowed to Chu Bei and begged. Looking at Jiang Taishu's sincere face, Chu Bei couldn't help shaking his head. He raised his hand to support Jiang Taishu and said, "Get up. What a pair of ill-fated lovers. I'll make an exception this time. I'll snatch a person from the king of hell for you." His calm voice immediately caused an uproar round the dragon transformation pool. The master of the Jiang family, Duanda, Yifan, and the others all changed their expressions greatly. They widened their eyes and didn't seem to believe what they had just heard. Could a dead person really be revived after the divine soul had dissipated? If it was true, what a heaven-defying method it was. Thank you, boss. Hearing Chu Bei's words, Jiang Taishu's body trembled. For 1,000 years ago, he had dominated the eastern wasteland. How high-spirited he was then. But now, he was like an old man with one foot in the grave. After a moment of silence, Chu Bei suddenly raised his head and pointed the sky-splitting axe in his hand at the void. Suddenly, the sky changed color. Then, with a flash of lightning, Chu Bei appeared in the distant sky, hovering in the void. He stomped his right foot and shouted toward the ground. King of Hell, we haven't seen each other for 10,000 years. Today, I'm only asking for one person. If you don't give it to me, I'll kill my way into the 9 levels of underground and crush your infernal hell. Under Chu Bei's deliberate control, the mighty voice resounded in every corner of the divine city like rolling thunder. It clearly resounded in everyone's mind. In the next moment, the originally clear sky in the distant sky was instantly shrouded by the chaotic energy. After a while, the entire divine city was shrouded in the chaotic energy. It gave people a feeling that they had traveled through time, as if they were in the river of time. Rumble. At this moment, in the chaotic energy, the sound of thunder resounded through the world. Rumble. The sound of thunder resounded through the sky. However, when everyone in the divine city raised their heads to look at the sky that was filled with chaotic energy, they could not see any lightning. It's raining. It's raining. When have you seen rain shining? This is not rain at all. Thunder. This is thunder and lightning. Oh my God, it's actually raining thunder. However, these thunder droplets did not seem to be very powerful. They were just like raindrops when they hit their bodies. What rich spiritual energy. Quickly let these thunder droplets merge into your bodies. All the cells in your body are stretched. It's simply too comfortable. I've broken through. I've broken through. Just as everyone raised their heads to look at the sky, puzzled because they could not find any thunder and lightning in the chaotic energy, thunder droplets that resembled raindrops began to fall from the chaotic energy. At first, no one felt that there was anything special about these thunder droplets. However, after the first person who was invaded by the thunder droplets screamed in excitement, one after another, excited screams could be heard. In particular, some of the cultivators whose cultivation was at the critical point opened their mouths and swallowed the falling thunder droplets directly. What a magical power! I didn't expect Boss Chu to have such an ability. The effect of these thunder droplets from his axe is already comparable to the effect of divine source. The Jiang family head, Jiang Yi, and the others raised their heads to look at the falling thunder droplets in the sky. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Even the divine king Jiang Taishu was shocked. This was the first time he had encountered such a technique. It was simply not man-made. God, why didn't you bestow such a technique upon me? Duanda took off his upper body and allowed the thunder droplets to hit him. He raised his head to question the heavens. Yifan looked at the figure in the sky with admiration. His eyes were filled with longing. Perhaps one day, he would also possess such an ability. Soul return. Suddenly, 2 heavy syllables reverberated in the sky like thunder. At that moment, all the cultivators of the Jiang family, including the Jiang family head and Jiang Yi, trembled violently. They all stared at the sky without blinking, especially the divine king Jiang Taishu. He clenched his fists nervously and stared at the sky. This concerned the life and death of Fairy Rosy Cloud. Can it really bring the dead back to life? Yifan, Ji Ziyue, and the others were filled with anticipation. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. After Chu Bei shouted, the falling thunder droplets in the sky suddenly accelerated. Amidst the dense electric current, the spiritual energy in the sky above the divine city became a few hundred times denser. Under everyone's gaze, strange blue runes appeared in the thunder droplets one by one. These runes gathered together in large numbers and seemed to have some kind of magical power. Then, the runes lit up with resplendent light. Countless light spots that were different from the thunder droplets surged from different directions and finally gathered together. As the number of light spots increased, they gathered together and gradually formed a human figure. Oh my God, what is that? Is that a human? Oh no, is that a human soul? What is Boss Chu doing? Who is that spiritual body? Could it be Fairy Rosy Cloud? The Fairy Rosy Cloud that the divine king Jiang Taishu called out earlier. You're saying that Boss Chu is reviving the dead Fairy Rosy Cloud? It must be. Didn't you hear his shout earlier? He's asking the king of hell for a person. In the divine city, a group of cultivators looked at the spiritual body that was gradually taking shape in front of Chu Bei with astonishment. Their mouths were wide open as if they were struck by lightning. Rosy Cloud. Jiang Taishu's body trembled as he softly called out the name. At this moment, the divine power in his body seemed to have been sucked dry. He could not even stand properly and almost fell. Condense. Suddenly, another loud shout resounded through the sky. Chu Bei waved his axe. The light from the axe's blade surged. Countless thunder droplets in the sky rushed to the side of the half-formed spiritual body and penetrated it bit by bit. As time passed, faint divine consciousness fluctuations began to appear in the sky. It was released by the spiritual body that was gradually taking shape. Another quarter of an hour passed. With a low, muffled sound, the spiritual body suddenly moved and stood upright. Is this hell? The spiritual body glanced at the surrounding thunder droplets. At first, she was a little confused. When she saw Jiang Taishu below, her body suddenly trembled and swayed. With a trembling voice, she said, Big brother Taishu, I am not dead, alive. Fairy Rosy Cloud really came back to life. The patriarch of the Jiang family, Duanda, and the others looked at the spiritual body in the sky. They were all dumbfounded, their faces full of surprise. They really could not imagine that there was someone in this world who could really revive the dead. Rosy Cloud. Jiang Taishu's tears flowed down his face. He could not calm down and his voice was filled with excitement as he approached Fairy Rosy Cloud step by step. Big brother Taishu, am I dreaming? Fairy Rosy Cloud cried tears of joy. However, just as she was about to go toward Jiang Taishu, a strange metallic clang suddenly came from below. In the next moment, a pitch-black chain with a diameter of half a meter, releasing a strange black light and flickering with strange runes, emerged from the depths of the earth. It broke through the ground and soared into the sky, quickly and accurately wrapping around Fairy Rosy Cloud's spiritual body. Immediately, a shrill scream came from Fairy Rosy Cloud's mouth. Rosy Cloud. Divine King Jiang Taishu's expression changed abruptly. Divine power gushed out of his palm. With a raise of his hand, an attack that contained the great Tao of heaven and earth blasted toward the pitch-black chain. Clang. However, at this moment, another pitch-black chain emerged from the depths of the earth. It first annihilated Jiang Taishu's attack as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, then ruthlessly whipped Jiang Taishu's body. With a muffled bang, the space around Jiang Taishu exploded under the whip of the pitch-black chain. Jiang Taishu was sent flying 100 meters away before he could stabilize himself in the air. Taking a closer look, Jiang Taishu spat out a mouthful of blood, and his aura fluctuated violently. Look, what's going on over there? Wasn't Fairy Rosy Cloud revived by Boss Chu? What's with the chains that suddenly appeared? Where did those chains come from? Even Divine King Jiang Taishu was sent flying. It's unbelievable. Above the underground palace, the sudden change caused the cultivators in the Divine City to fall into a state of confusion. Their mouths were wide open as they stared at the two pitch-black chains in shock as if they had seen a ghost. Yifan, Jiziyue, the patriarch of the Jiang family, and the others were also at a loss. Clearly, this situation was somewhat unexpected. Boss Chu, this, Divine King Jiang Taishu stabilized his qi and blood. After glancing at the pitch-black chains with some fear, he looked at Chu Bei with a pleading gaze. He had never expected that the divine power contained in the chains that emerged from the underground would surpass that of a divine king like him. Rumble. Suddenly, the ground trembled as a soul-stirring roar sounded. In the center of the Divine City, a huge crack appeared in the ground. The crack was bottomless, like a bottomless abyss. She's already dead. How can she return to the human world? An eerie and terrifying voice that seemed to come from hell came from the bottomless abyss and gradually floated above the Divine City. Just listening to the voice sent chills down one's spine, and a bone-piercing chill ran down one's spine. Immediately after, a group of 16 people slowly emerged from the abyss. The 16 of them were divided into two teams. One team was fully dressed in white, while the other team was fully dressed in black. Each of them was riding a strange beast that had never been seen before. The beast's roar could be heard in every corner of the Divine City. This was a group of people who were unprecedentedly powerful. Runes flickered all over their bodies, and they were filled with the aura of the great Tao. Among the 16 people, the aura fluctuations of any one of them were far above that of divine King Jiang Taishu. Each of them was filled with bloodlust. They were like people who had been dead for many years, and their bodies emitted a bone-piercing chill. On the surface of their bodies, in addition to the flickering runes, there was also a lingering blood-red light. These people each held a pitch-black chain in their hands. The two chains that had bound Fairy Rosy Cloud's soul and injured Jiang Taishu had come from two of them. Oh my God, who are these guys? Why do I see them coming out from the underground? And looking at their auras, none of them seemed to be weaker than divine King Jiang Taishu. Their attire is so strange. It reminds me of those existences recorded in ancient books. But do they really exist in this world? Don't keep us in suspense. Tell us, who are they? What are the origins of those chains in their hands? Yin Yang Ghost Soldiers, the army that guards hell. What? This legend isn't made up. They really exist. In every corner of the divine city, the eyes of the cultivators fell on the group of 16 people. After discussing, their eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 299. Ghost Soldiers. Half-Saint Realm. Jiang Taishu's face turned ugly. Obviously, he knew some of the secrets, but he didn't expect these ghost soldiers to be so powerful. Unlike ordinary cultivators, he was a person from more than 4,000 years ago. Although there were very few transcendents in the Big Dipper at that time, there would still occasionally be extremely terrifying existences who would appear out of nowhere and preach about the Tao. They would talk about the specific realms of the path of cultivation. Traditionally, the path of cultivation could be divided into 5 major realms: Reincarnation Realm, Tao Palace Realm, For Extreme Realm, Dragon Transformation Realm, Immortal Foundation Realm. However, compared to the first 4 levels, the scope of the Immortal Foundation Realm was simply too vast. One could even say that the disparity between each and every step was as vast as the heavens and the earth, as vast as the heavens and the earth. The first stage of the Immortal Foundation Realm was known as the Half-Step Almighty, which was the realm of the clan of the Ancients and the Supreme Elders. The second stage of the Immortal Foundation Realm was known as the Almighty, which was the realm of the Patriarch of the Jiang clan and the Holy Lord of the Holy Land. The third stage of the Immortal Foundation Realm was known as the King, which was the realm of the current divine King Jiang Taishu. The fourth stage of the Immortal Foundation Realm was known as the Half-Saint Realm. Judging from the aura of these ghost soldiers, it was very likely that these guys were in this realm. As for the 5th stage, 6th stage, and so on, they were beyond the scope of Jiang Taishu's understanding. In his opinion, this Boss Chu must be a transcendent at the 5th, 6th, or even 7th stage. Your soul has already dissipated. How can you stay in the mortal world? Come with us. The leader of the white-robed ghost soldiers was sitting on a savage beast. His voice was filled with supreme majesty and was even divine. As his cold and emotionless voice fell, he casually glanced at Fairy Rosy Cloud's soul and moved his right hand. The pitch-black chain with a diameter of 5 meters in his palm suddenly clanged. The black surface had a blood-red glow, and a murderous aura soared into the sky as if it had drunk the blood of countless living beings. Almost at the same time, Fairy Rosy Cloud let out another shrill scream. Fate is really playing tricks on people. In the end, I still can't be with Brother Taishu, but it's good that I can still see him. In the endless pain, Fairy Rosy Cloud's expression twisted as she struggled. She looked at Jiang Taishu with deep reluctance. Under the pull of the chains, his spiritual body was quickly dragged towards the group. Rosy Cloud. No one is to hurt her. Jiang Taishu's eyes, Rosy Cloud's Rosy Cloud Divine Cauldron. In the next moment, Jiang Taishu placed his palms on the eternal universe divine furnace, and the majestic divine power in his body gushed out. Rosy Cloud. Rosy Roar. Rosy Roar. Extreme Emperor Rosy be afraid. Rosy Jiang Taishu stared coldly at the ghost soldiers. His hair fluttered in the wind. Cold in the forest shouted, and controlled the eternal universe divine furnace to attack a group of ghost soldiers. However, before the eternal universe divine furnace could hit the ghost soldier, an axe blade was even faster. In the blink of an eye, it swept past the pitch-black chain. Crack! With a roar, the black chain that bound Fairy Rosy Cloud instantly shattered into pieces and dissipated in the void. Seeing the chains break apart, the two yin-yang ghost teams frowned. But before they could say anything, an inexplicable chill surged in their hearts. In the next moment, these ghost soldiers instinctively condensed a layer of tough armor around their bodies. Of course, they weren't afraid of the eternal universe divine furnace, and they were afraid of the strange primitive energy that seemed to be everywhere. Pung pung pung. In an instant, the sound of thunder rang out. The group of ghost soldiers only felt the divine power in their bodies explode inexplicably. It was as if their internal organs had been shattered. Then, wisps of energy that they had never touched before began to swim around their bodies. Diffuse, explode, clang, clang, clang. The two groups of ghost soldiers suddenly let out shrill screams, as if they were suffering unparalleled torture from hell. After a long time, the strange energy that had eroded every cell in their bodies dissipated. The pain of the 16 ghost soldiers also gradually eased. However, compared to before, their auras were extremely weak. Their pale faces were devoid of color. It's you. You were also the one who gathered her scattered soul. Who are you? Who are you? What you've done is against the Tao of the world. Karma. You will be punished. The leaders of the two groups of yin-yang ghost soldiers stared coldly at Chu Bei, their voices chilling. Tao? Karma? Chu Bei smiled and waved his robe. In this world, I am the Tao. You call yourself the Tao? How arrogant. The two groups of ghost soldiers glared at Chu Bei. After looking at each other, they shook the chains in their hands, bringing about a deafening sound of metal clashing. Chu Bei put one hand behind his back and held the axe with the other. He calmly swept his gaze over the 16 ghost soldiers, his eyes filled with disdain. Capture him. As the two leading ghost soldiers yelled, the other ghost soldiers shook their chains. Back down. You are far from being his match. Just as the chains were about to hit Chu Bei, a hoarse voice suddenly came from the abyss like a curse. The pitch of this demonic voice was not high, but it penetrated the countless lightning droplets in the sky, reaching every corner of the divine city and even hundreds of miles away. It was extremely terrifying. In an instant, the abyss collapsed, and a figure wrapped in boundless yin-chi floated out from within. Strands of dark and penetrating light fell from the top of his head, protecting his entire body. It was incomparably majestic. At a closer look, this figure was particularly strange. The left side of his robe was white, while the right side was black. In his hand was a large brush, and the tip of the brush was made of an unknown ancient beast's hair. It was also half white and half black. Judge. Seeing the person who had come, the two groups of ghost soldiers immediately bowed and greeted him. There was a faint joy between their brows. The judge had come in person. No matter who the other party was, they would have to obediently follow them back to the netherworld. Rumble, the figure that was called Judge by the ghost soldiers, slowly floated in the air. When he was as tall as Chu Bei, a human-shaped virtual image suddenly appeared behind him, with its head in the sky and its feet on the ground. The figure was filled with golden light. His body reached the 9 heavens and stepped on the 9 underworlds. The terrifying aura made people tremble. He looked down at the world with disdain, and his majesty was awe-inspiring. Even the great emperor's aura produced by Jiang Taishu's eternal universe divine furnace was annihilated by this terrifying aura. In an instant, the entire divine city was filled with a strong sense of oppression. It was suffocating. It was as if a great emperor had been resurrected. Who is he? This aura that can pierce through the sky. Could he be a great emperor? Yin-yang brush. He is the yin-yang judge who controls life and death. Yin-yang ghost soldiers, yin-yang judge. They really exist. Will we really enter hell and reincarnation after we die? In the divine city, a group of cultivators raised their heads and looked at the huge figure standing between the heavens and the earth. They trembled. Oh no, this guy's aura is incredible. It is even more powerful than that old lunatic who has lived for more than 6,000 years. Boss can't kill him, right? Feeling the aura released by the yin-yang judge, the fat Taoist, Duanda, gulped. No, the boss is so powerful. He is an existence who has discussed Tao with our ancestors. Ji Ziyue bit her lips. Although she said so, her frown showed that she was still a little worried. After all, the yin-yang judge only existed in ancient books. He was a terrifying existence that controlled life and death. Only God knew how powerful he was. The patriarch of the Jiang family, Jiang Yi, and even Jiang Taishu showed a look of horror. This yin-yang judge, who only existed in legends, had suddenly appeared and was obviously beyond their expectations. The aura released by him had actually intimidated the eternal universe divine furnace. Her soul has already scattered. You are going against the Tao of life and death by gathering her soul like this. The yin-yang judge held the judge's brush in his hand and looked at Chu Bei. He shook his head and waved the brush at Fairy Rosy Cloud Soul. Chi, chi, chi. Suddenly, a huge hand formed by countless death chi reached out from the void and grabbed at Fairy Rosy Cloud. Are you trying to stop me? Before the big hand could grab Fairy Rosy Clouds, the thunderbolts in the sky surged. Amidst the roaring thunder, they directly broke the big hand made of death aura. Then, they turned into blazing thunderbolts, as if they were carrying thousands of comets and crashing into the big hand. The yin-yang judge frowned slightly and immediately pointed out two strange runes in the air. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The void shook and everyone was shocked. It was not limited to the Divine City. The practitioners outside the Divine City also felt it. They could not help but look at the sky above the underground palace, full of shock. Is Boss Chu going to fight with the yin-yang judge? We won't be affected, will we? In the sky, the two runes drawn by the judge's brush intertwined with the blazing lightning. It was as if two immortal lights had broken through the shackles of heaven and earth and dissipated at the same time. All the practitioners in the city were dumbfounded. They were so excited that they almost went crazy. There was also some fear in their eyes. My fellow Taoist, do you have to go against heaven's will? The yin-yang judge stared coldly at Chu Bei. The virtual image behind him trembled slightly. Suddenly, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Ghosts cried and gods howled. Not to mention you. Even if the king of hell comes, he can't stop me. Chu Bei's voice became low, mixed with supreme majesty. As soon as the indifferent syllables fell, he waved his sleeve. Suddenly, the chaotic light in the sky spread out endlessly. In a few breaths, the chaotic light enveloped the entire eastern wilderness and continued to spread out at a faster and faster speed. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the soul-stirring sound of thunder came from the tumbling chaotic aura, followed by all kinds of thunder. Chapter 300. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, battle axes, hooks, forks, whips, maces, hammers, dagger axes, swords, sticks, lances, spears, rakes. Countless weapons evolved from lightning appeared in the chaotic chi. These lightning weapons seemed to have come from outer space. They broke through the clouds and lit up the eternity. They released the immortal lightning power to their heart's content, connecting the sky and the earth. Rumble. Under the rolling lightning, the endless death chi behind the yin and yang judge seemed to be purified. Is the end of the world? Why are there rolling dark clouds on a sunny day? What's with these lightning bolts? This lightning aura came from the eastern wilderness. What happened there? Did the ancient emperor come back to life? My gosh, is the former overlord of the eastern wilderness coming back to the world? A heavenly anomaly, this was an extremely shocking sight. The phenomenon shocked the world. At this moment, the entire sky above the Big Dipper was covered by dense lightning bolts. Every cultivator in every corner could feel the majestic lightning power. All the cultivators in the central continent, the western desert, the northern plains, and the South Mountains looked up at the sky in astonishment. Some of the leaders of the top forces looked in the direction of the eastern wilderness. They frowned and looked solemn. As for the cultivators in the eastern wilderness, especially in the Divine City, they all collapsed on the ground. Looking at the various lightning bolts in the sky, they trembled and turned pale. Although the lightning power wasn't targeted at them, it still made their sea of reincarnation stagnate, and they felt powerless. My gosh, is this the real phenomenon of the shop owner? I can't see the end of it. Gzu's mouth formed an O shape. Looking at the dense lightning bolts in the sky, her eyes were wide open. The Jiang family leader and Jiang Taishu didn't look as shocked as Gzue, but they couldn't help but gasp. Woof, woof, Emperor, Xiaohei misses you. Feeling the lightning power in the sky, the big black dog cried painfully and looked up to the sky. It seemed to remember the years when it was with Emperor Wu Shi. Rumble. Lightning bolts filled the sky, and the lightning power filled the air. Thunder roared all over the sky. One of the 7 life forbidden zones, Undying Mountain. Every single mountain was black to the point of erupting. Some were like blades that reached into the clouds, while others were like bulls that were lying on the ground. Mists curled about, creating a majestic atmosphere. He could see a stone man that was missing an arm picking herbs. He could also see a stone crow that was missing a claw flying in the sky. These were all holy spirits, and they looked very strange. Who is this? A tall demonic figure looked up at the sky. This was the innermost depths of Undying Mountain. It exceeded everyone's imagination. It wasn't some terrifying demonic land, but rather a paradise that was pure and natural. A peach garden was filled with falling petals. The few thatched cottages had returned to their original state. An old tortoise was crawling slowly towards the back of the thatched cottage. It was actually the divine medicine, the black tortoise. I don't know. An old man leaned against the wall. He looked very old, but his hands and eyes were quick. He held down the Xuanwu medicine to prevent it from slipping away. I want to fight. That tall and majestic godlike demonic figure held a black Heavenart halberd in his hand, killing intent surging. There isn't much life left. Stop messing around. The old man shook his head, stroking the black tortoise's head in his bosom. Forget it. After a sigh, that imposing demonic godlike figure narrowed his eyes. A pair of cold pupils shot out radiance, actually directly piercing through the heavens. Surging lightning retreated from above Undying Mountain, one of the 7 life forbidden zones, ruins of gods. There were many ruins here, Dao traces everywhere. There was an enormous southern heavenly gate that towered here. These were the remains of the ancient heavenly court that had fallen here back then. The ruins were boundless. This was previously the paradise of deities, but now it was known as the ruins of gods, a place where supreme beings were hibernating. In the depths of the ruins of gods, there was an enormous immortal peach tree. Waves of dense immortal mist rose around the tree, refreshing one's mind and flowing with fragrance. Behind the immortal peach tree was a divine spring that gushed out from the earth veins. It had never dried up since ancient times. After gushing out from the ground, it seeped into the earth's core, forming a cycle. This was a true divine spring, the best water source for planting immortal medicines, refining pills, and extending one's life essence. Hong, right at this time, at the bottom of the divine spring, a figure that had been sleeping for tens of thousands of years opened his eyes. He had 9 layers of pupils. Light shot out from his pupils, causing the spring water to boil. The entire ruins of gods released a heaven overflowing aura. The endless lightning above the ruins of gods immediately seemed to have received some type of guidance. They first gathered together, and then all of them poured into the figure at the bottom of the divine spring. One of the 7 life forbidden zones, Immortal Mausoleum. This place was desolate, hills everywhere. None of them were that tall, but they were all extremely imposing. Some had an energy curling about them, while others had auspicious multicolored light rushing into the heavens. It was extremely mysterious, believed to be the burial ground of ancient immortals. Even though all of the tombs were empty, people believed that it was caused by the immortal body's emergence, not leaving behind a true body. Over 100 prehistoric steels trembled intensely, crazily devouring the lightning above. An enormous shadow could faintly be seen below the steels. Following a cold snort, over 100 steels rose from the ground, releasing resplendent and dazzling radiance. They were like blazing suns, releasing heaven overflowing auras. One of the 7 life forbidden zones, Sea of Reincarnation. It was silver, like an ocean formed by endless rivers of stars falling down. It was very vast, with no end in sight. The silver sea was boundless, even bigger than the entire eastern wilderness. However, it was usually impossible to see any trace of it. Clearly, this was another world, and the exit was connected to a mysterious area in the Big Dipper. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a silver wave rolled up like a metal storm. The sea surface seemed to have been cut in half by a giant sword, and an unimaginably huge palm suddenly reached out from the middle, tearing down all of the lightning above. Then, the waves merged together again, becoming incomparably calm, as if nothing had happened. One of the 7 life forbidden zones, Origin Ancient Mine. The reddish-brown earth seemed to have been soaked in blood, cold and lonely. Desolation and emptiness coexisted. A few huge rocks stood on the ground, and at first glance, they looked like tombstones. The world was dusky, and a faint black fog added a sense of eeriness to this world. The endless reddish-brown earth was serene and deathly silent, without any signs of life. There were the best origin stones in the entire Big Dipper here, and mines of various sizes were densely packed together. However, if one looked carefully, one would see that there were thousands of corpses piled up under each mine. Who was this guy? What an unfamiliar aura. Who knows? Maybe it was forced to sublimate. Looks like it can't wait until the next golden age. Becoming an immortal is so difficult. Faint sighs that were difficult to capture came from the Origin Ancient Mine. A gray light gushed out from below, and the lightning that enveloped the ancient mine disappeared. One of the 7 life forbidden zones, Burial Sky Island. A powerful paragon had once lived here, but he had provoked the primal Chaos Emperor, who ruled the world. That battle had caused the heavens to collapse and the earth to split, turning the galaxy into dust. In the end, the primal Chaos Emperor had displayed his might. Although he had won, he had exhausted all of his essence blood and died here, unable to live a second life. However, after his death, his obsession was not extinguished, and he turned into a soul comparable to a supreme existence. Chi, Chi, Chi. On the floating island, a huge black shadow wandered around. It glanced at the lightning that had suddenly appeared above it, opened its mouth, and inhaled. The rolling lightning entered its mouth, and then there was a crunching sound of chewing. One of the 7 life forbidden zones, Desolate Ancient Forbidden Land. A graceful woman stood on top of the sacred mountain. She was so beautiful that it felt unreal, transcendent, and indifferent. She was clearly on top of the sacred mountain, but people felt that she was in the immortal world. She gave off an otherworldly temperament, as if she did not belong to this world. She had an otherworldly aura, giving people the feeling that she would ascend to immortality at any time. The woman stared in the direction of the divine city. Her gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the void for thousands of miles. Her beautiful eyes reflected Chu Bei's figure, and she murmured with confusion, "So this is true strength." The woman looked at the lightning in the sky and did nothing. She just shook her head and returned to the sacred mountain. Almost at the same time, the 7 life forbidden zones, except for the desolate ancient forbidden land, erupted with an incomparably terrifying aura. The domineering energy spread throughout the entire Big Dipper void. In various secret places in the mountains, ferocious beasts roared as if they were frightened. Above the divine city, Chu Bei stood with his hands behind his back. He was like an ancient great emperor who had descended to the world, like an immortal king who was inspecting all living beings. He looked coldly at the yin-yang judge. The immortal king descends to the 9 heavens, the yin-yang life and death diagram, the chaotic green lotus, the stars illuminating the sky, the splendid land, and so on. All kinds of ancient phenomena appeared behind Chu Bei. Of course, these were all formed by the terrifying lightning. In the Divine City, a group of cultivators looked at the various phenomena behind Chu Bei, and they were all dumbfounded. They were so shocked that they could not speak at all. The yin-yang judge looked straight at Chu Bei. After a long time, he finally shook his head, glanced in the direction of fairy rosy clouds, and sighed faintly. In the next moment, the illusory image behind him, which had a terrifying aura and was filled with golden light, disappeared. Return. The yin-yang judge put away his judge's brush. After taking one last look at Chu Bei, his body slowly sank back into the bottomless abyss until he disappeared. Even the judge can't subdue him? The two teams of yin-yang ghost soldiers looked at Chu Bei in horror, their eyes filled with disbelief. Although they did not know how powerful the yin-yang judge was, they had seen a sage king die under the judge's brush. However, even such a powerful existence was helpless in front of the mysterious person in front of them. Clang, clang, clang. Amidst the sound of metal clashing, the two teams of yin-yang ghost soldiers disappeared into the abyss with the yin-yang judge. Gradually, the abyss began to heal. The dark clouds, rolling thunder, and all kinds of phenomena in the sky began to dissipate. The sky became clear again, and the ground healed. If countless people had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have thought that nothing had happened. Did Boss Chu win without a fight? He did it. He actually did it. He really snatched Fairy Rosy Cloud back from the King of Hell. Even the yin-yang judge had no choice but to retreat. What cultivation realm is this Boss Chu at? Is he really an ancient emperor? Maybe. Anyway, we can't reach his realm in a few lifetimes. It's out of our reach. In the Divine City, a group of cultivators looked at Chu Bei in the sky. After coming back to their senses, their throats squirmed. Other than shock, there was also admiration in their eyes. Those ghost soldiers and the yin-yang judge have all retreated. Boss Chu is indeed stronger. Ji Ziyue's face was filled with excitement. Her eyes narrowed into crescents, and her canine teeth sparkled. Woof, woof, woof. The Black Emperor howled into the sky as he looked at Chu Bei in the sky. It was as if he was looking at the unparalleled majesty of the Emperor of no beginning in the past. In the sky, Chu Bei glanced indifferently at Fairy Rosy Cloud's corpse next to the dragon transformation pool below. He spread out his right hand, and a huge suction force suddenly gushed out. In the next moment, Fairy Rosy Cloud's corpse flew up and headed toward Chu Bei. Her corpse emitted a sparkling light. Merge. After calmly uttering a word, Chu Bei first used the power of thunder to reactivate the life aura of Fairy Rosy Cloud's corpse. Then, with a wave of his hand, her soul and body merged into one. Brother Taishu. In the air, Fairy Rosy Cloud slowly opened her eyes. Her clothes fluttered, and there were traces of tears on her peerless face. Brother Taishu, in the past, you found the earth essence fruit for me to replenish my lifespan. You wanted me to live with you for 4,000 years and die together in this world. But this separation has been more than 4,000 years. If time could return to 4,500 years ago, Brother Taishu, I would have gone with you instead of staying in the Holy Land. With tears in her eyes, Fairy Rosy Cloud slowly walked to Jiang Taishu's side step by step. She raised her hand and stroked Jiang Taishu's face. Her gray lips trembled, and she was almost speechless. Let bygones be bygones. Aren't we together again now? Jiang Taishu gently stroked the black hair on Fairy Rosy Cloud's forehead. His whole body lit up with a dazzling light. Then, Jiang Taishu's appearance began to change. He changed from an old man to a handsome young man. In the future, we can walk under the sunset. Jiang Taishu took Fairy Rosy Cloud's hand and walked to Chu Bei. The two of them knelt down heavily at the same time. Thank you, boss, for reviving Rosy Cloud. Thank you for your kindness. Jiang Taishu was not the only one. All the cultivators of the Jiang family, including the Jiang family's patriarch, kowtowed to Chu Bei. Their voices were filled with respect. Get up, all of you. I have done a good deed. As for the karma, let me bear it. Chu Bei looked at the blue sky. With a wave of his robe, his domineering aura was undoubtedly revealed. Lovers would eventually find a way to get married. Those who spread dog food would eventually become siblings. The majestic aura in the divine city dissipated. The cultivators recovered from the shock. They were still discussing the battle in the sky intensely. As for the experts of the central continent, the western desert, the northern plains, and the southern mountains, they turned into rainbows and rushed to the eastern wilderness. When they saw people, they asked about the reason for the dense thunderbolts earlier. Soon, this sensational news spread like wildfire under the influence of the tapwater effect. Chapter 301. The Eastern Wilderness, Middle Continent, Western Desert, Northern Plains, and Nanling were all having intense discussions. It was the topic of conversation before and after tea. "Oh my God, I've finally straightened everything out. Don't keep us in suspense. Quickly tell us. What was going on with the lightning that came, and went as fast as the end of the world? Did an ancient arch awaken? It's a long story. Let me have a sip of tea first. Do you know the Jiang family's godly monarch from 4,500 years ago in the eastern wilderness? The Jiang Taishu who killed the Sun Sovereign. That's right, it's him. In fact, he didn't die. He was only sealed in the Purple Mountain. When he was rescued, he was already on his last breath. When the factions of the Middle Continent learned of it, 13 sacred lords went to kill him. Among them was an old monster who had lived for more than 4,000 years, the sovereign of the Eventide. Heavens, don't tell me you're saying that the lightning phenomenon was caused by Jiang Taishu? Of course not. If not for Boss Chu's help, Jiang Taishu would have died at the hands of the sovereign of the Eventide. Boss Chu? It sounds a little unfamiliar. Could he be the reincarnation of an ancient arch? This Boss Chu is quite impressive. It's said that he has lived since the primordial era. As for his deeds, I still need to drink 2 more cups of water before I can slowly recount them. Obtaining the Thearch's heart, the Middle Continent's treasure, suppressing the arch corpse, entering the bronze immortal palace. Heavens! What? He killed 13 sacred lords, and the sovereign of the Eventide with a raise of his hand. He snatched someone from the king of hell and successfully revived the dead? So that lightning phenomenon was caused by him. How heaven-defying is that? In the entire Big Dipper, all the cultivators' topics revolved around Tao ancestor Hongjun. The battle in the Divine City came to an end. As the entire Big Dipper was intensely discussing the main character of the battle, Boss Chu, strange fluctuations began to be emitted from various hidden corners of Big Dipper. Perhaps it was due to the influence of Chu Bei's lightning phenomenon, or perhaps it was due to the terrifying aura released by the 7 forbidden lands, but the strange energy fluctuations in these hidden places became restless. It felt as if some extraordinary existence was about to emerge. At the edge of the eastern wasteland, there was a great world of ice and snow, and as far as the eye could see, it was a pure white ice field. At the bottom of the ice field, the huge, transparent God Source started to shake. In the first divine source, there was a shriveled body. There was only a layer of old skin sticking to the bones. There were some withered yellow hair on the head. It was very sparse, and it was releasing a bone-piercing chill. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. Cracks started to appear on the surface of the divine source, and the divine source shards started to fall off. In the second piece of divine origin, there was an old ape. It was tall and majestic, sitting cross-legged. It was tall and had snow-white fur all over its body. Its expression was peaceful, as if it was still alive. The old ape seemed to have faintly fused with the great Tao, as if it had become one with the world. Crack! The old ape moved its claws and tore apart a corner of the divine source. An aura that looked down on the world seeped out of its body. At the edge of the northern plains, deep underground, there was a vast underground palace. This was a huge project that seemed to have used endless manpower. It was extremely vast, and one could not see the end of it. The majestic underground palace was ancient, as if it was covered in a layer of dust. The stone rooms, stone halls, and everything else were filled with the traces of time. However, the underground palace was not that dark. There were a few strange stones that flickered, and one could clearly see everything here. Dragon chi surged like rivers, crashing into every corner of the underground palace. Bathing in it made one feel refreshed. There were countless huge pupae in this vast underground palace. At that moment, the originally quiet pupae suddenly shook, and at the same time, there were all sorts of strange screeching sounds. Gradually, mysterious creatures started to extend their claws and heads from these pupae. They all released a monstrous aura. At the edge of the southern mountains, this was a vast abyss, like a bottomless pit. It seemed to be able to devour one's mind and make one sink into it. The abyss was extremely empty and silent, as if it was connected to the netherworld. Even if one was far away, one's heart would palpitate, and an inexplicable chill would run down their backs. In the endless dark abyss, dragon chi was like a tide, surging continuously. Occasionally, divine light would flash, and a few divine source granules would rush out, sparkling and translucent. The abyss was just too big, and it was difficult to illuminate it all. It was still a little dim. As far as the eye could see, it was empty. It did not seem like an underground palace at all, but more like an ancient battlefield. Among them, the most eye-catching was an ancient altar. It was difficult to guess how long it had existed. It was engraved with the traces of time, and even the stones were about to decay. Strangely, it was actually a 5-colored altar, made of ancient stones of 5 different colors. On the altar, a transparent ancient coffin floated up and down. It made one feel as if their flesh and bones were about to collapse. This was an extremely terrifying pressure. The human race has lived too well these years. It's time to return to the era when the primordial race dominated. In the transparent ancient coffin was a 2-meter-long divine source granule. It was dazzling, and one could not open one's eyes. There was a humanoid creature sealed in it. As a low and sinister voice rang out, the divine source exploded, and the coffin lid was sent flying. The humanoid creature stood up, and 2 beams of dim light shot out from its eyes, directly piercing through the heavens, bringing about a strange phenomenon. The Jiang family, one of the clan of the ancients, Boss Chu. These are all the valuable treasures that the Jiang family can take out now. The master of the Jiang family looked at Chu Bei respectfully, shook his head, and sighed. He did not expect that Boss Chu would take the initiative to ask for a reward after helping them. Moreover, he asked for all the valuable treasures of the Jiang family. Looking at the mountain of treasures in front of him, Chu Bei nodded in satisfaction. With 90% of the Jiang family's wealth, his cultivation conversion progress should be able to reach 100%. Host's cultivation conversion progress 69. Host's cultivation conversion progress 70. Host's cultivation conversion progress 71. Host's cultivation conversion progress 100%. The host is rewarded with the right to use a level 16 commodity. The result was just as Chu Bei had expected. The Jiang family's wealth was not all used up, but the conversion progress had reached 100%. Besides, what made Chu Bei happy was that after the successful conversion, he was rewarded with the right to use a level 16 commodity. The level 15 sky-splitting axe gave him the strength of a peak great sage, and the level 16 commodity corresponded to the realm of a quasi-emperor. 3 days later, Yin capital, the capital of the Yin nation. The city was very prosperous, and the main road was bustling with people coming and going. Silver-striped red dates, big and sweet. Fried mantou, free if you don't like it. Ox duck blood vermicelli soup, thick blood and thick soup, juicy and delicious. Come and try it. Sugar-coated haws, only 1 copper coin per skewer. On the streets, all kinds of people were shouting and peddling. Boss, are you bringing us to cultivate in the bustling city? Yifan looked at Chu Bei in confusion. Chu Bei chuckled, then extended his finger and pointed at it. Yifan immediately looked in the direction Chu Bei was pointing. It was a corner, and a dirty little girl was begging pitifully from a pot-bellied man. She was frightened by the man's roar. The little girl timidly took 2 steps back and looked down at her little shoes with toe holes. She did not dare to say a word. Boss, are you here to look for her? Yifan did not go over immediately. Instead, he frowned and carefully observed the little girl, trying to see if there was anything different about her. However, to his disappointment, he did not find anything unusual. Chu Bei nodded slightly in response. This was a new first-class agent. A little girl related to Emperor Merciless. The little girl was obviously frightened by the man's roar. She did not dare to beg the passers-by anymore. She wiped her tears and walked forward with her head lowered, almost bumping into people a few times. She was afraid that she would be scolded again. She lowered her head timidly. The more one looked at her, the more pitiful she looked. Is she an orphan? Yifan could not stand it anymore. He thought of the first time he saw Shoutingting. However, Shoutingting still had a grandfather and did not fall to the point of begging. With a swoosh, Yifan's figure flashed and squatted in front of the little girl, looking at her gently. I'm sorry, big brother. I didn't do it on purpose. The little girl lowered her head and walked forward in a daze. Because she almost bumped into Yifan, her eyes were filled with tears. She was afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm not a bad person. Yifan stood up and bought 4 steaming soup dumplings. He wrapped them in oil paper and handed them to the little girl. Thank you. You're a kind big brother. Tears rolled down the little girl's face. She took the soup dumplings with a grateful expression. Yifan patted the little girl's head and said, Don't you have any relatives? The little girl blinked her big eyes and shook her head in confusion. She said, No. Nanan doesn't remember anything. You don't remember anything? Yifan felt a little strange and could not help but ask. Every once in a while, Nanan will forget everything in the past. I don't have any impression of it. Maybe after a while, I won't even remember the kind big brother. The little girl lowered her head and was somewhat depressed. Why is this happening? Yifan was puzzled. Nanan doesn't know either. I seem to have forgotten a lot of things. I don't know where I came from and where I'm going. Everyone else has relatives, but I don't. Nanan is very lonely and sad. The little girl lowered her head and her eyes were filled with tears. Hearing this, Yifan frowned. He probed the little girl's body with his divine sense again and checked carefully. However, he still could not find anything unusual. Why is this happening? Yifan was puzzled. This little girl was obviously not ordinary. However, why couldn't he find anything? Kind big brother, this is for you. The little girl took out a small crystal-clear stone from her tattered clothes. 7 colors of light flowed around it. It was obviously not an ordinary item. Chapter 302. This is... Yifan was astonished. Nanan doesn't know either. Every once in a while, a small stone like this will appear. It's edible and very sweet. It can keep Nanan from being hungry for many days. The little girl carefully handed the crystal-clear stone in her hand to Yifan to express her gratitude. Come, come, come. Let me have a taste. Duanda seemed to have noticed something. He licked his lips and reached out to snatch the small stone. Woof woof. The Black Emperor bit Duanda's arm and pulled it with all its might. Its dog eyes were filled with disdain. Yifan knocked Duanda back with a punch and glared at him. Then, he held the small stone in his palm and observed it carefully. However, after observing it for a while, he could not figure out what it was. However, he could feel an abnormal energy fluctuation from the small stone that was the size of a finger joint. He was sure that it was not an ordinary item. Little Nanan, a few buns are not worth such a good treasure like you. Quickly put it away. Yifan wanted to return the small stone to the little girl. However, the little girl kept retreating and shook her head. Big brother, just accept it. Otherwise, Nanan has nothing to repay you. Hearing this, Yifan sighed. Such a young child already knew how to repay others. It was really sad. The little girl was very stubborn. No matter what, she would not take back the small stone. Helpless, Yifan could only look at Chu Bei, hoping to find out the mystery of the little girl's origin from the latter. Boss, it's clearly the first time I want to meet her, but why do I have a strange feeling? This feeling is very strange and hard to explain. Yifan finally asked the question in his heart. Nanan also feels that Big Brother is very close. The little girl lowered her head and muttered to herself, The cause of your past life, the effect of your present life. This is the fate that you can't cut off. Chu Bei pretended to be mysterious. Cause of my past life? Yifan was surprised, but when he continued to ask, Chu Bei didn't say anything more and stopped at the right time. Little Nanan, since you don't have a home, Why don't you follow us from now on? Chu Bei squatted down and patted the little girl's head. The little girl nodded, her big watery eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, big brother. Chu Bei smiled and then took out the proxy ring. Come, put it on. After a long while, Chu Bei signed a contract with little Nan Nan. Then, Chu Bei looked at Yifan and pointed at the small stone in his hand. This is the Emperor's Dao fruit. Eating it will be very helpful to your cultivation. The arch Dao fruit. Hearing Chu Bei's words, Duanda immediately cried out in alarm. Then, he looked at the little girl in astonishment and swallowed his saliva. This little one was a great emperor in her previous life. Yifan, Blackie, and Ji Ziyue also looked at Chu Bei in a daze. They were dumbfounded as they awaited Chu Bei's answer. When the time comes, you will naturally know some things, Chu Bei said indifferently. After saying that, he looked at little Nan Nan. This was the manifestation of ruthless obsession, her Dao fruit. Perhaps even without him, it wouldn't be long before little Nan Nan and Yifan would meet by chance. Everything was predestined. Chu Bei still sympathized with ruthless childhood experience. She and her brother relied on each other since they were young. In the end, her brother was killed by the Yuhua God dynasty. But on the other hand, if her brother didn't die, she wouldn't cultivate for revenge and create the heaven-devouring demonic skill with her stunning talent. In the end, she became a great emperor and became the most talented great emperor in history. Boss, I found you. At this moment, Zhang Yifei descended from the sky with a group of people. Other than the people from the Zhang family, there were also people from the Jade Lake Sacred Ground, Yaoguang Sacred Ground, and the Ji family of the Clan of the Ancients. What's the matter? Chu Bei looked at Zhang Yifei calmly and swept his gaze across the people behind him. There was a hint of confusion in his eyes. When did these people from the top factions get so close to him? Boss, an ancient royal family member is here. He said that he has a letter to give to the strongest person in the eastern wilderness. Zhang Yifei glanced at little Nan Nan. After a flash of surprise in his eyes, he revealed an earth-shattering news. What? An ancient royal family member. Just when Yifan was confused, Ji Ziyue and Duanda exclaimed in shock. Looking at his appearance, there is no doubt that he is an ancient creature, but I don't know if he is a royal or not. Zhang Yifei continued. Hearing this, Ji Ziyue and Duanda became even more agitated. There was an uproar. An ancient creature has really appeared. He actually wants to meet the strongest person in the eastern wilderness. Did he say where he came from? Duanda and Ji Ziyue asked first. He only said that he wants to deliver the letter to the strongest cultivator in the eastern wilderness. He didn't say anything else. A woman from the Jade Lake replied. An ancient creature has appeared. I don't know what kind of disaster it will cause. Ji Ziyue looked serious. Apparently, she did not have a good impression of ancient creatures. Gradually, the cultivators who passed by the main road also gathered around. When they heard Zhang Yifei's words, some of the cultivators who knew about ancient creatures were shocked. Ancient creatures? Didn't they disappear a long time ago? Are they not extinct? Oh my God, if they are still alive and reappear in today's world, I'm afraid this land will have a new master. Those ancient kings could summon the wind and rain and run rampant in the world. They are far beyond our current cultivators. Perhaps only a few immortal inheritances with extreme Dao Saint weapons have some confidence, said Yifutian. They are just ancient creatures. I'm afraid you have forgotten about Boss Chu. He's a living primordial existence. Boss Chu? Isn't he? Isn't he? Seeing that more and more people were gathering around, Chu Bei immediately waved his hand. With a flash of rainbow light, he appeared in the distant sky with a group of people. In the sky, Chu Bei looked at Zhang Yifei calmly and said, I don't belong to the eastern wilderness. Logically speaking, this letter should be given to Jiang Taishu. Boss, actually, we also wanted to let the godly King Patriarch receive the letter. At this point, Zhang Yifei's expression became rather ugly. He stuttered, but this ancient royal is too arrogant and despotic. What's even worse is that he's extremely powerful. Even the God King ancestor isn't his opponent. He said that the God King ancestor isn't qualified to receive this letter. Oh, he has bad intentions? Chu Bei narrowed his eyes. Where is this ancient royal now? He is in the Jiang family. Zhang Yifei looked at Chu Bei respectfully. Let's go. I will go with you. With that, Chu Bei waved his hand again. Rolling lightning lit up the sky, and the group of people disappeared. At the same time, in the huge square of the Jiang family, countless figures hovered above the square, waiting for battle. The two figures at the front were Jiang Taishu and Fairy Rosy Cloud. Behind them were the Jiang family patriarch, the Alcade sacred leader, the Ji family patriarch, and the Jade Lake sacred leader. At that moment, these overlords of the eastern wilderness were looking ahead with a serious expression. There was a figure hovering there. To be more precise, this was a humanoid archaic creature. It was over 2 meters tall and extremely sturdy. Its entire body was covered in fine silver scales that flowed with brilliance. Its face was the same. It had a pair of wide silver wings, as if it was carrying 2 snow-white heavenly blades on its back. He was strong and powerful, and his silver hair was like a waterfall. There was a jade horn between his eyebrows that curved like a dragon. It was over a foot long and was crystal clear. In addition, there was a small head on each of his broad shoulders. One was a wolf's head, and the other was a crocodile's head. They were both covered in fine silver scales. Hallelujah! The ancient being hovered in the air with his head held high and said, I don't understand what you are saying. The cultivators, including Jiang Taishu and Fairy Rosy Cloud, looked at each other, not knowing what he meant. Have you forgotten the common language of the primordial age? It seems that too much time has passed. You humans have forgotten too many things, the ancient being said in human language. Did we humans use this language to communicate in the primordial age? Jiang Taishu looked at the ancient being cautiously and asked tentatively. In the previous battle, he was still no match for the ancient being even after using the battle word incantation. Ridiculous. Back then, humans were just an inferior race. If we wanted to survive, we naturally had to learn this divine language. The ancient being's words were filled with pride. He looked at Jiang Taishu and the others with disdain. Inferior race? Hearing the ancient being's contemptuous words and looking at his disdainful expression, Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, and the others' faces turned even uglier. Their eyes were filled with anger. Divine language. Of course, there were also some people who were in a daze. It was as if they had seen records of the ancient language in some ancient books. This is the language of the ancient gods. It is shared by all races. Otherwise, every race has its own language. How can we communicate? The ancient being looked indifferent. Then, he glanced at Jiang Taishu and the others impatiently. The eastern wilderness is too weak now. Even a group of ants like you can dominate it. What a joke. How long will it take for the boss Chu you're talking about to arrive? You son of AB*T. How dare you be disrespectful to the boss? As soon as the ancient being finished speaking, Duanda's curses came from the void along with the sound of thunder. The next moment, a group of people appeared above the square. The leader was Chu Bei. Greetings, Boss Chu. Upon seeing who it was, the group of cultivators, including Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, the head of the Ji family, and other top experts, bowed to Chu Bei one after another with respect between their brows. Chu Bei's gaze swept over Jiang Taishu and the others. The corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. He nodded slightly as a greeting. Were you the one who insulted me just now? The ancient being fixed his cold gaze on Duanda. A powerful aura seeped out of his body. His cold words were filled with strong killing intent. Do you have a worm in your ear? Do you want me to say it again? You son of AB*TCH. Duanda raised his middle finger provocatively at the ancient being, not forgetting to raise his voice. You're courting death. The ancient being shouted coldly. Then, 2 dark beams of light shot out from his eyes toward Duanda. Wherever they passed, the void rumbled. Duanda shrugged. There was no fear on his face. He just instinctively moved behind Chu Bei. Chapter 303. Whoosh. A terrifying sound rang out. The primordial being's attack was directed at Duanda. However, just as the 2 terrifying beams of light were about to hit Duanda, a tiny divine light appeared out of thin air and instantly annihilated the black beams of light. "You're Boss Chu, the strongest person in the eastern wilderness that they're talking about?" Seeing that his attack had been defeated, the ancient creature retracted his disdainful expression. His gaze landed on Chu Bei, and he began to carefully size him up. "Give me the letter." Chu Bei glanced at the primordial being and said calmly, "Whether you can receive the letter or not, I'll have to see if you're qualified." The primordial being said coldly. He took a step forward and raised his right arm to slap down. Instantly, the space before him rumbled as an enormous hand that was coiled with primeval talisman markings covered the sky and blotted out the sun. It possessed extreme strength and was incomparably ferocious, and it pressed down towards Chu Bei like an expanse of the earth. It was peerlessly terrifying. "This is the power." Jiang Yifei's expression changed slightly when he saw the giant hand pressing down. He was not the only one. The younger generation of the other sacred grounds and ancient families frowned. Under this aura, the spiritual power in their bodies was severely suppressed. They could not even activate their weapons. Boss Chu, he should be at the peak of the God King stage. Jiang Taishu glanced at the giant hand pressing down on Chu Bei and spoke at the right time. In the previous battle, he had been defeated by his opponent's palm. Boom! Just as the giant hand was about to land on Chu Bei and the others' heads, Chu Bei's eyes narrowed. Two beams of purple light shot out from his eyes. With a loud boom, the giant hand was instantly pierced through by a terrifying force and dissipated. How is this possible? This time, the primordial being was stunned. The primordial ancient mountain palm was his most powerful attack, but it was destroyed so easily by his opponent. Just as the ancient creature was still immersed in shock, a huge, pitch-black hole suddenly appeared above his head. Then, there was a huge rumbling sound, and an enormous black-purple beam of divine light descended with monstrous might. The primordial being's pupils constricted, and he felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. He did not have time to think and struck out another mountain-suppressing palm as fast as he could. The moment the two powers merged, the primordial being let out a shrill scream. Even with all his divine power, he could not block the terrifying power contained in the black-purple lightning. In almost an instant, his hands turned into bloody paste, blasted apart by the divine radiance. Then, his arms were like tofu, also shattering with a kacha sound. Blood and bone dregs splashed out, scattering across the void. "I've finally seen Boss Chu in action." Behind Chu Bei, the group of cultivators were stunned. Their eyes shone with golden light, and their gazes were filled with worship. "Half-sage, no, you're a sage." The primordial being wailed miserably. He looked at Chu Bei in horror, fear in his eyes. At his level, he could already regrow his flesh and bones. But now, what made him panic was that his broken hands could not be regenerated. There was a terrifying unknown power spreading there, preventing him from regrowing his limbs. "Is this the letter?" Suddenly, a voice as calm as water rang in the primordial being's ears. When he looked over, his expression changed. The other party had already taken away his letter without him noticing. In other words, if the other party really wanted to kill him, he would not have the time to react. At the thought of this, the primordial being endured the intense pain and broke out in a cold sweat. In the sky, Chu Bei's face was as calm as water. Although he looked like a young man, the power he emitted from time to time was 10 times, or even 100 times stronger than divine King Jiang Taishu. Chu Bei pinched the letter with 2 fingers. Tiny divine rainbows swam around his fingertips. With a whoosh, the letter was destroyed. After reading the contents of the letter, Chu Bei rubbed his fingertips. The letter turned into specks of light and dissipated in front of everyone's eyes. "Go back and tell your king that it's fine if you continue to lie low, but if you really dare to invade the human race, I will kill you without mercy." A cold voice suddenly came from Chu Bei's mouth. It was like rolling thunder. Under the terrifying sound waves, the primordial being's face turned pale. He staggered back a few steps and spat out a mouthful of blood. It took him a long time to stabilize his body. When he looked at Chu Bei again, the hatred in his eyes was even more intense. "I'll remember you." The next time we meet, I'll make you regret it." As soon as he finished speaking, the primordial being glanced at Chu Bei one last time. He spat out a mouthful of blood and disappeared into the void. "I've changed my mind. You'd better stay here forever." After hearing the primordial being's words, Chu Bei suddenly changed his tone. He flipped his right hand, and the void where the primordial being disappeared suddenly exploded. Under the boundless pressure, a large amount of space fragments fell from the sky. Then, the primordial being, who had disappeared into the void and was about to escape, reappeared in front of everyone's eyes. At this moment, the primordial being's expression was distorted. His body was frantically struggling as if he was being tortured inhumanely. Bang! With a loud explosion, the primordial being's body exploded under everyone's shocked gazes. Along with the explosion was his distorted soul. Looking at the sky full of blood in the distance, the group of cultivators swallowed their saliva. "Boss Chu, what did that letter say?" Jiang Taishu walked forward and cupped his fists respectfully at Chu Bei. The Wavering Light Sacred Leader, the Ji family head, the Jade Lake Sacred Leader, and the rest followed closely behind. They were confused. The primordial royal family has awakened from their slumber. They want all of you to move out of the grotto heavens and blessed lands. They will move in one day, Chu Bei said calmly. What? They want us to hand over the sacred ground? Damn it. The Jade Lake Sacred Leader and the Wavering Light Sacred Leader looked at each other. Their faces were filled with rage. As for Jiang Taishu, the Ji family head, and the rest, their expressions were even worse. Their ancestral lands had been passed down since the Antiquity Age. How could they hand it over to the primordial royal family? Boss Chu, what if we don't agree? The Jade Lake Sacred Leader asked. Other than a battle, do you have any other choice? When the time comes, we can only talk with our strength. Chu Bei chuckled. Are they going to become enemies with the human race? Jiang Taishu's eyes narrowed. Even if blood flows like a river, we won't hand over the sacred ground left by our ancestors. Yes, fight. All the cultivators were filled with fighting spirit. Chu Bei wasn't the only one who received a letter from the primordial royal family. The Middle Ground, the West Desert, the North Plains, and the South Mountains all received the same letter. The Middle Ground was huge. It was divided into 4 major empires. They were the Great Xia Empire, the Guhua Empire, the Nineli Empire, and the Divine Lands Empire. In the main hall of the Extraordinary Warrior's residence, there were 4 people sitting in the center. One of them was wearing a golden red long robe and a dazzling golden crown. Although he was a little old, he had an invisible aura as he sat there. He was the emperor of the Great Xia Empire. The second person was wearing a white long robe and a purple gold crown. He was the emperor of the Guhua Empire. The third person was wearing a purple dragon robe and a pentagonal platinum crown. He was the emperor of the Nineli Empire. The fourth person was wearing a golden long robe with dragon and phoenix patterns. He was the emperor of the Divine Lands Empire. Below the 4 emperors, there were close to 100 people dressed in luxurious robes. These people all had a vigorous aura and naturally had a powerful aura. The sect leader of the Qin sect, the pavilion leader of the Divine Secrets Pavilion, the sect leader of the Vermilion Bird sect, the clan leader of the Kai family. Everyone in the hall was a leader of a force in the middle ground. At this moment, these big shots that were rarely seen were all gathered together. Their faces were gloomy, and the atmosphere was extremely silent. Damn it, do they really think they're the masters of the Big Dipper? How dare they ask us to give up our territory? The emperor of the Nineli Empire slammed his hand on the chair and stood up with a face full of anger. If they want to fight, then let's fight. The emperor of the Divine Lands Empire narrowed his eyes. Let's fight to the end. We won't give up even an inch of land. The leaders of the various forces stood up one after another and expressed their stance. The West Desert. This was the gathering place of all the Buddhist followers of the Big Dipper. In the great thunderclap temple of Mount Meru, a group of eminent monks sat cross-legged on praying mats with a solemn expression. Among these monks, there were the abbot of the great thunderclap temple, Alan Temple, Agan Temple, Shinkong Temple, Lantua Temple, and so on. A primordial being has appeared. The Big Dipper is going to change. Bah. The West Desert can't avoid this battle. We can only face the enemy head-on. All the major teleportation formations have been repaired. If we really can't win, we can escape to other regions. I'm afraid Eastern Wilderness, Zhengzhou, and other places have received the same letter. They must be on high alert now. In the Thunderclap Temple, the eminent monks discussed. The atmosphere was solemn. Northern Plains. It was snowing all year round here. There were three major forces: the Ice God Palace, the Wang family of the ancients, and the primordial giants. At this moment, in the Ice God Palace, three figures sat facing each other. One of the men held a letter in his hand, his eyes filled with rage. They won't even let go of such a remote place? So what if they're primordial beings? If they really dare to come, we'll make sure they don't return. The primordial royals aren't easy to deal with. You fought that guy just now. He's already at the peak of the godly king realm. This won't be easy. These guys are from 10,000 years ago. We haven't seen exactly how strong they are. If every primordial royal is at the peak of the godly king realm, this will be difficult. The three figures looked at each other. Their auras continued to rise. Southern Mountains. This place was controlled by three major forces. One was the War God Temple, which was the largest human sect in the Southern Mountains. The second was the Demon King Palace, where the Southern Mountains demons were. The third was the Barbarian Tribe, also known as the Ancient War God Tribe. These primordial beings probably don't understand the current situation. Tens of thousands of years have passed. The Big Dipper is no longer their era. But we don't know which of the primordial royals have awakened. Will there be any peerless powerhouses? If it really comes to a critical moment, we can open a space tunnel and join forces with Zhengzhou in the Southern Mountains to mobilize the entire Big Dipper. I heard that there's a powerful person in Eastern Wilderness. He seems to be called Boss Chu. It's said that he's from the Antiquity Age. I wonder if he can intimidate the primordial royals. As time passed, the Eastern Wilderness, Western Desert, Zhengzhou, Northern Plains, and Southern Mountains all entered a state of preparation. Artifacts passed down from ancient times, primordial artifacts, and the archweapons were all brought out and placed in the center of the sects and sacred grounds. They were ready to attack at any time. What the hell is going on? Why are they suddenly in a state of preparation? My God, you're too uninformed. The primordial beings have awakened. Maybe a bloodbath will break out tomorrow. Primordial beings? Don't they only exist in ancient books? Didn't they die? According to the news, the primordial royals sent letters to the Eastern Wilderness, Western Desert, Zhengzhou, Northern Plains, and Southern Mountains. They threatened to kill us all if we stay away from the blessed grotto heavens. Damn it, are they so arrogant? Do they really think we humans are easy to bully? The primordial royals are so powerful. Even the Sacred Lord and the others don't know what kind of terrifying beings have awakened in the primordial royals. That's why they're so vigilant. According to what I know, the top experts of the 5 major regions have already communicated with each other. All the major teleportation formations have been activated, and they can move between the 5 regions at any time. So, in order to face these primordial beings, the 5 major regions have put aside their past grievances and stood on the same side. Gradually, all the factions in the Big Dipper felt that a storm was coming. Their conversations all revolved around the primordial beings. Retrieval mission activated. Host receives Tree of Enlightenment Tea. During the mission, Host can mobilize the power of the Quasi-Emperor in this world. After the mission ends, the power of the Quasi-Emperor will disappear. Mission reward: Host cultivation will be directly raised to the peak of rank 12. In a great hall of the Jiang family of the ancients, Chu Bei was calmly drinking tea. At this moment, the familiar sound of the system echoed in his mind. Tree of Enlightenment Tea? The power of a quasi-emperor? Peak of rank 12? Chu Bei muttered. After successfully converting all the cultivation in the Dolua and Dolua dimensions, he received the right to use a rank 16 commodity. According to the system's evaluation, the rank 16 commodity gave him the power of a quasi-emperor. During this retrieval mission, he could also use the power of a quasi-emperor given by the system. He could use this opportunity to familiarize himself with the power of a quasi-emperor in advance. As for himself, his cultivation was still at the peak of rank 11, which was equivalent to the peak of the God King in the shrouded sky dimension. The method he used to kill the primordial beings not long ago was exchanged for a rank 12 commodity, which gave him the power of a half-saint. After thinking for a moment, Chu Bei put down the teacup in his hand, got up, and glanced at Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, and the others. I'm going out for a while. Boss Chu, the primordial beings have been born. You are the only supreme being in the eastern wilderness. Where are you going? How long will you be gone for? Jiang Taishu immediately stood up and bowed to Chu Bei. His face was full of respect. The Undying Mountain. Chu Bei looked at the red on the map where the Tree of Enlightenment was and said calmly, Chapter 304. What? Jiang Taishu's expression changed when he heard Chu Bei mention the Undying Mountain. After regaining his senses, Jiang Taishu gulped and looked at Chu Bei. He quickly said, Boss Chu, the Undying Mountain is one of the 7 life forbidden zones. Rumor has it that a few years ago, a great sage physique and an ancient emperor worked hard for 2 lifetimes, but they still couldn't level it. May I know why you're going there this time? I'm going to take a tree and call it Tao Enlightenment, Chu Bei said calmly as he looked at Jiang Taishu. So you're also going there for that tree. But according to the ancient records, the ancient emperor who tried to level the Undying Mountain couldn't bring out the tree of Tao Enlightenment. In my opinion, there must be a terrifying existence sleeping in the Undying Mountain. I'm afraid that you're going there this time. Jiang Taishu looked worried as he tried to persuade Chu Bei. There were too many terrifying legends about the Undying Mountain. The existence that came out of the mountain had once caused chaos in the world, causing rivers of blood and mountains of corpses to form the most terrifying Dark Age. If it weren't for the great sage physique and the ancient emperor who worked hard for 2 lifetimes to suppress all of this, the history of the human race in the Big Dipper would have been rewritten. Which ancient emperor fought his way into the Undying Mountain? Duanda asked. The Void Emperor, Jiang Taishu replied. It's my ancestor. Jizue's mouth was wide open when she heard that. Her delicate and flawless face was full of shock. Little guy, I didn't expect your ancestor to have such great achievements. Duanda patted Jizue's shoulder. There were very few legends about the Void Emperor in the world. Even Jizue, his descendant, didn't know much about him. Who would have thought that this ancient emperor was so powerful that he once fought his way into the Undying Mountain and created such a great achievement that resolved the disaster of the human race? The Black Emperor glanced at Duanda and roared, The ancient emperors, every single one of them is a peerless talent. Over the countless years, only one of them is born out of millions and millions of living beings. Even if there are not many rumors about a certain ancient emperor, it is still not something a stinky Taoist like you can guess. Hearing the Black Emperor's words, Jiang Taishu nodded in agreement. Every great emperor was the only main character of a period. In terms of their lives, every one of them had endless legends. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Chu Bei nodded at Jiang Taishu. The 7 forbidden zones. I'm really curious about what's inside them. Jizue rubbed her hands as her eyes sparkled. This time, I will be going alone. I will be back soon. However, when Jizue looked at Chu Bei expectantly, the latter's calm voice poured a bucket of cold water on her head. In the next moment, a ripple arose around Chu Bei, and his figure disappeared from everyone's line of sight. Undying Mountain. The scorching sun hung high in the sky. The mountain was full of vitality and lush green. The black soil and black cliffs looked ancient and mysterious. This was a primitive region with boundless wastelands. Many ancient trees towered into the sky like small mountains. Many ancient vines even buried the large mountains underneath. Everything was too primitive. These vines had been growing for who knew how many years. They should have turned into demons a long time ago. Unfortunately, they were still in their original form and did not have intelligence. Occasionally, one could see strange beasts in the mountain. They were all unheard of. Each and every one of them was strange and terrifying. They were full of dangerous auras. They were all ancient beasts with intelligence. The deeper they went, the more they could feel the terrifying aura of this hell. It made one's mind uneasy. It was as if they were getting closer to a supreme existence. In the central region, there was a large mountain. It was majestic and imposing. It was as if it had been standing here since the beginning of time. It could be said to be the king of mountains, the emperor of mountains. It was majestic and imposing. The mountain was lush and verdant. It was full of ancient trees as tall as the sky. It was full of vitality. There were even some lakes adorning the mountainside. However, they could not hide the true color of this mountain. It was as black as ink. At this moment, Chu Bei was hovering at the peak of this mountain. His gaze stopped at a certain direction. There was an ancient tree there. Although it was covered by many ancient trees, its unique aura was particularly special. It was not very tall, only 3 meters tall. However, it was as vigorous as a horned dragon. Its old skin was cracked as if it had experienced millions of years. It was very strange. The leaves on the tree were not the same. Every leaf was different from the others. They were all sparkling and translucent as if they were carved out of jade. Some of the leaves were like small cauldrons, misty and hazy. Some of the leaves were like divine phoenixes, flickering with multicolored light. Some of the leaves were like immortals sitting cross-legged, incomparably vivid. Some were like gold, resplendent. Some were like scarlet jade, incomparably bright. There were all kinds of colors. As expected of the Tree of Enlightenment, with a step, Chu Bei had already arrived under the Tree of Enlightenment. There seemed to be endless Tao flowing around the tree. It was full of mysterious power, making one's heart empty. Chu Bei was not cultivating, but it seemed like he was comprehending the Tao. Dang! At this moment, a bell rang. In the next moment, a blurry figure appeared in front of Chu Bei. It was hard to see clearly. He walked around the Enlightenment ancient tea tree, and above his head was a large bell that was surrounded by chaotic fog. The large bell seemed to be able to stop time. The chaos was turbulent, and thousands of strands fell down. It was incomparably mysterious and hazy, like the flowing river of time. After a long while, the blurry figure sat cross-legged under the Tree of Enlightenment. The large bell bobbed up and down, making him look like a piece of nothingness. It was as if he had merged with the vast world and was about to disappear. Not long after, he seemed to be deep in thought. He stood up and looked at the sky. Then, step by step, he walked away. He seemed to be walking against the river of time, passing through the gate of time and leaving, returning to the distant primordial era. Heavenly Emperor No Beginning. Looking at the figure that was gradually disappearing into the distance, Chu Bei muttered softly. If the Black Emperor was here, he would probably cry until his heart and lungs were torn apart. After No Beginning left, another figure appeared under the ancient tree. She was even more mysterious. Only a shadow could be seen. Behind her, a jar with a ghost face was floating up and down. She walked under the ancient tree. With every step she took, a black hole would appear under her feet. It was as if she wanted to swallow everyone. Just a little bit of her aura leaked out, and the world seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Heavenly Emperor Ruthless has also been here, Chu Bei whispered. After the abyss-like shadow left, several more figures appeared under the Tree of Enlightenment. However, they didn't stay for too long and left. I didn't expect so many heavenly emperors to have come to comprehend the Tao under this tree. After letting out a sigh, Chu Bei placed his right hand on the trunk of the Tree of Enlightenment. Rustle. Instantly, the 3-meter-tall ancient tree shook. Its trunk emitted a divine light. It was so strange. Every leaf was different. There was a small cauldron, a divine phoenix, an immortal, a divine bell, mountains and rivers, clouds, the 8 trigrams. All kinds of shapes were vivid and lifelike. Every leaf was like a small world. They represented a different kind of Tao, swaying with dreamy brilliance. Upon closer inspection, the trunk was ancient, full of atmosphere and ancient intent. On the other hand, the leaves were natural, full of life and Tao. The two blended together, mysterious and abstruse. It's you. Just as Chu Bei was about to subdue the Tree of Enlightenment, according to the method described by the system, a soul-stirring low voice suddenly sounded in the undying mountain. In the next moment, amidst strange rumbling sounds, the roar of the river water could be heard. This was a black river surging. It was so black that it was shriveled. There was no trace of life in it. Just looking at it made one's heart feel suffocated. Feeling the death aura of the Black River, a chill inexplicably surged in Chu Bei's heart. With a raise of his hand, he used the power of a quasi-emperor given by the system. Amidst the rumbling sounds, an incomparably huge gap appeared in the sky above the Black River. Inside the gap, a 10,000 feet tall thunder giant held a giant thunder axe and hacked at the Black River. Rustle. The sound of thunder resounded through the sky. The Black River surged, bringing up layers of strange splashes. So it's you. No wonder you have the confidence to enter the Undying Mountain. As the calm voice fell, a tall and majestic demonic figure faintly appeared above the Black River. He held a black halberd in his hand and was full of murderous intent. With a sigh, the majestic figure narrowed his eyes. His cold eyes shot out a sharp light, directly piercing through the 10,000 feet tall thunder giant. Hearing the other party's words, Chu Bei's heart trembled. The other party actually knew about him. After being stunned, Chu Bei quickly calmed down. It must be because the other party had sensed the aura that he had revealed when he used a level 15 product not long ago. Stone Emperor? Relying on the memory in his mind, Chu Bei tentatively guessed, without any emotion on his face. In the primordial age, the great emperor-level figures were called ancient emperors, such as the immortal emperor and the empress of the West. In the primordial age, they were called great emperors, such as the great emperor, the ruthless emperor, and the void emperor. Since you know that this is my resting place, why do you still dare to come here? You even want to take away the tree of enlightenment. The tall and majestic demonic figure snorted coldly. The river beneath his feet churned violently, like a black dragon about to engulf the sky. It made one feel uneasy. This is a little difficult. After confirming the other party's identity, Chu Bei frowned. The masters of these forbidden areas were all great emperors in the past. However, in order to live longer, when they sensed that their lives were fading, they cut off their Tao prematurely, causing their cultivation level to drop. After sleeping for 10,000 years, even my bones are loose. The Stone Emperor waved his black halberd. Let's fight. As the cold and emotionless syllables fell, the halberd in the Stone Emperor's hand slashed down, creating a buzzing sound. Suddenly, the sky above the Undying Mountain cracked open, and dragon patterns appeared. A huge gap seemed to be connected to the vast universe outside the Big Dipper star region. Through the gap, one could faintly see the sun, moon, and stars outside. A black dragon appeared from the gap, carrying with it the mysterious power of the universe. Its entire body emitted a demonic light, and amidst flickering runes, it swept toward Chu Bei. The black dragon had a spirit, and it bared its fangs and brandished its claws. This was a Supreme Emperor Tao attack. In an instant, the void around Chu Bei was ignited. Time and space seemed to be frozen. In the blink of an eye, Chu Bei was engulfed. He couldn't dodge at all. Chapter 305. What's with this terrifying aura? Could it be that the ancient royal family has moved out in advance? No, that's impossible. This aura is coming from the direction of the Undying Mountain. What? The Undying Mountain of the Seven Forbidden Lands? It's said that the leaders of countless great forces have never come out after entering the mountain. I don't know what's inside. I once read an ancient book that recorded that the great sage Physique and the great emperor of ancient tried to flatten it with the power of 2 lifetimes, but they didn't succeed. Oh my God, what's going on above the Undying Mountain? Are those stars outside the Big Dipper? What's going on in the Undying Mountain? Could it be that the terrifying existence inside is fighting with someone? It can't be. Other than the great emperor of ancient, who else can make the existence inside create such a commotion? Even the cultivators who were tens of thousands of miles away could feel the aura coming from the Undying Mountain. As for the forces closer to the Undying Mountain, the group of cultivators was so scared that they were trembling. They looked up at the countless stars and the huge gap in the sky above the undying mountain with only astonishment in their eyes. Could it be that Mr. Chu has already fought with the terrifying existence in the mountain? In the Jiang family of the ancients, Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, Duanda, Yifan, and the others flew out of the main hall and stood in the void. They looked in the direction of the undying mountain and felt the terrifying aura drifting over from afar. Almost at the same time, the other 6 forbidden lands of the remote antiquity erupted with an incomparably strange aura at the same time. Numerous tyrannical divine senses pierced through the void and enveloped the undying mountain, as if they were sensing what was happening inside. In the process of obtaining the Path Understanding Tree for the system, in addition to the power of a quasi-emperor, the host also has an immortal body and is immune to all attacks below the true immortal realm. Hearing the system's voice again, Chu Bei's originally tightly furrowed brows relaxed. Then, he sized up the Stone Emperor's methods again. Is this the strength of the great Emperor of Ancient? The black dragon dispersed, and Chu Bei stood in place. He touched his chin with his right hand and sighed. At this moment, Chu Bei's body was completely wrapped in a spherical ripple. It was this spherical ripple that made him immune to the black dragon's damage. How is this possible? Who are you? When the Stone Emperor saw that Chu Bei was safe and sound, there was a hint of surprise in his voice. Although his strength was far from his peak, it would not be so easy for a quasi-emperor to take on his attack. Chu Bei glanced at the Epiphany Tree before glancing at the Stone Emperor. He couldn't help but curse the system in his mind. This was the first time he felt that the system was unreliable. Although he was immune to damage, he wasn't afraid of Stone Emperor's attacks. However, with his quasi-emperor strength, it was impossible for him to snatch the Path Understanding Tree from the Stone Emperor. He should be bestowed with the great Emperor realm. After a long while, the next time I come to the Undying Mountain, I will definitely have a good fight with you. Chu Bei cleared his throat, flicked his robe, and pretended to snort coldly before transforming into a ray of light and vanishing. I'll wait for you here. Next time, let's have a battle to the death. The Stone Emperor allowed Chu Bei to leave. He waved the halberd in his hand, and the lifeless black river in the west dissipated into nothingness. At the same time, the huge gap in the sky above the undying mountain gradually closed, and countless stars disappeared. In a few breaths' time, the majestic and terrifying aura in the undying mountain started to recede, and the place fell into a dead silence again. The Stone Emperor's tall and majestic figure also gradually disappeared from the void. The aura fluctuations have disappeared. The undying mountain has quieted down. Can anyone tell me what happened just now? If you want to know, you can go in and take a look yourself. We will give you moral support. Could it be that the battle has ended? It's a pity that we don't know what kind of existence is fighting. The various forces looked in the direction of the undying mountain and discussed animatedly. The Jiang family, one of the clan of the ancients. Boss Chu, it's great that you're fine. When they saw that Chu Bei had returned, Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, and the others immediately went forward to welcome him with joyful expressions. Boss, who was the person who fought with you just now? Duanda's eyes were filled with curiosity, and he immediately asked. The arch from the ancient era, Chu Bei said calmly. What? There's really a living arch of the ancient era inside. No wonder even the great sage physique and void the arch of the past couldn't completely destroy the undying mountain. When they heard Chu Bei's words, Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, Alcade's Sacred Master, and the others were all shocked. Huge waves surged in their hearts, and they looked at Chu Bei again with even more admiration. The fact that he could enter and exit the undying mountain safely and even fight with the arch of the ancient era meant that he was really the arch. When they thought of this, Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, and the others couldn't help but smile knowingly. With the arch overseeing the eastern wilderness, they didn't have to worry about the archaic royal clan invading them tomorrow. Boss, did you take the Tree of Enlightenment? Yifan asked curiously. This tree hasn't fully matured yet, so I didn't touch it. I'll take it away next time. Chu Bei waved his robe, looked up at the void at a 45-degree angle, and said calmly. Although the system was unreliable this time, he was relieved that the power of the boundary the arch that the system gave him was still there. Rumble. At that moment, a strange buzzing sound suddenly came from above the Jiang family. In the next moment, an incomparably huge purple bronze ancient ship appeared from the void. It was mottled with rust and was filled with an ancient aura, as if it had existed since the beginning of the world. Why would a ship suddenly appear? And it's so old and shabby. What a terrifying aura fluctuation. Why is my soul trembling? I'm about to suffocate. No, I have to activate the Sea of Reincarnation. Otherwise, my head will explode. What the hell is this thing? Don't tell me there's someone inside. The cultivators of the Jiang family looked up at the huge purple bronze ancient ship that appeared out of nowhere. Some of the weaker disciples held their heads in pain when they sensed the aura fluctuation from the ancient bronze warship. All of them quickly retreated as if they were avoiding a ferocious beast. The ancient ship was like the heavens crashing down on them, making them feel like they were going to collapse. "Who's there?" Jiang Taishu shouted. His thick black hair fluttered like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. He walked forward step by step, closing in on the ancient purple bronze ship. In the next moment, Jiang Taishu's left hand danced rhythmically. With a wave of his hand, thousands of sword radiances shot out, piercing through the void and hitting the ancient purple bronze ship. This was the battle symbol art, an offensive sacred art. Its destructive power was unparalleled in the same realm. As for his right hand, he summoned the eternal universe divine cauldron and activated the divine power in his body. The eternal universe divine cauldron trembled instantly, and a great emperor aura filled the air. At the same time, a terrifying beam of light shot toward the ancient purple bronze ship. Rumble. However, just as Jiang Taishu's 2 attacks were about to hit the ancient purple bronze ship, an ancient living being that looked like a godly phoenix flew out from the ship. It was bathed in divine fire, as if an immortal phoenix had descended to the mortal world. As soon as it appeared, a terrifying fluctuation shot up into the sky. The sky collapsed completely, and cracks in space spread out immediately. The heavens fell, and the earth cracked. With a casual wave of his hand, a majestic force annihilated Jiang Taishu's 2 terrifying attacks as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. You're from the immemorial royal family." Jiang Taishu looked at the ancient living being, and his face was instantly filled with vigilance. It was not difficult to see the fear in his eyes. "Human, you're weak. You're really too weak." The ancient living being that looked like a godly phoenix glanced at Jiang Taishu with disdain and commented on the immortal king Jiang Taishu. As soon as its cold and emotionless voice fell, an ocean-like aura rippled out with it as the center, spreading out for thousands of miles. Even the dark clouds in the horizon rolled. The immortal king ancestor's eternal universe divine cauldron was instantly destroyed by it. What's its background? It seems to be even more powerful than the ancient living being from before. Is this purple bronze ancient ship a treasure of the immemorial royal family? All the cultivators of the Jiang family looked at the ancient ship and the godly phoenix in horror. They instinctively swallowed their saliva, and their gazes landed on Chu Bei in the end. If it was someone that even the immortal king ancestor could not deal with, then perhaps only this boss Chu could. Where's Bai Luo? It came to deliver the message a long time ago. Why didn't it return? The ancient living being that looked like a godly phoenix spoke. Its chilling voice carried a monstrous might. Hearing that, Jiang Taishu, Fairy Rosy Cloud, Alcade's sacred leader, and the others' expressions turned ugly. It turned out that this seemingly more powerful immemorial royal family had come for that guy from before. "He's dead." At that moment, an extremely calm voice drifted through the air. "What? He's dead." Suddenly, a cold voice filled with dense killing intent sounded. In the next moment, the ancient living being that looked like a godly phoenix shot out 2 crimson beams of light from its eyes at Chu Bei, who had spoken. Wherever the crimson beams of light passed, the void immediately collapsed, and a long rainbow of runes appeared. Rumble. Chu Bei made his move. and there was a deafening roar between heaven and earth instantly. At the same time, the distant sky cracked open, and thousands of snake-shaped thunderbolts with destructive auras descended from the sky, landing around the ancient purple bronze ship one after another. The thunderbolts shot into the sky and covered the entire ancient purple bronze ship. It seemed to have isolated the ancient ship from the outside world, and the strange aura that came from the ancient ship was also instantly blocked inside. Chu Bei moved. First, he pointed his finger and shattered the two crimson beams of light that the ancient living being shot at him. Then, he took a step forward and appeared directly on the ancient purple bronze ship. Human, you. Looking at the figure that suddenly appeared beside it, the pupils of the ancient living being that looked like a godly phoenix suddenly shrank. Chu Bei just smiled at the ancient living being, and then stretched out his right hand and gently patted the deck. Chu Bei strolled leisurely, like a demon lord crossing the heavens, and landed on the ancient purple bronze ship with a single step. Rumble. He casually slapped the deck of the ship. Just as this seemingly light and powerless palm landed, the purple bronze ship exploded with an earth-shattering boom. This incomparably terrifying explosion's aftermath, if not for the rolling thunderbolts around it, would have annihilated all the living beings within thousands of kilometers. In the midst of the thunderbolts, terrifying fluctuations boiled in every corner of the ancient ship. The void collapsed completely, and a huge crack spread out on the deck. Not a moment later, with a boom, the ancient purple bronze ship that seemed to have existed since the ancient times was torn apart, turning into a large number of fragments. Upon closer inspection, in addition to the fragments of the warship, there were also countless pieces of flesh and bones mixed in. These were the ancient living beings on Yuan Zhan's ship. Before they could come out to fight, they had already been blasted into pieces by Chu Bei. Chu Bei was very satisfied with this attack. The power of a quasi-emperor couldn't deal with the Stone Emperor, but it couldn't be easier to deal with these so-called ancient royal families. Chapter 306. You destroyed my warship and killed my people. Human, you deserve to die. An angry roar filled with strong killing intent sounded from the distant sky, followed by rolling thunder and strong winds. The wind blades were black and cut through the void, scraping out chaos. At this moment, there was a kind of desolation in the sky and on the ground. It was as if a god from hell had broken out of his cage and came to this world to carry out a world-destroying operation. Rolling murderous intent filled the air like a hurricane. An existence above the sage level. Jiang Taishu's pupils suddenly shrank. Under this aura, he could not summon any will to resist. If not for Chu Bei's presence, it would be difficult to resist this terrifying power even if all of them attacked together. Bang! The void beside the ancient creature that looked like a divine phoenix trembled and a figure walked out. He was wearing a dark metal armor that flickered with a black light and had a majestic figure. He really looked like a god. His body was surrounded by brilliance, and his black sacred robe was cold. It covered his entire body and looked very heroic. However, his face was a little pale, as if he had not seen the sun for thousands of years. He was very handsome, but there were traces of wrinkles left behind by the passage of time. His hair had also turned white and lost some of its luster. Only his eyes were pitch black like two black gemstones and looked very spirited. One could imagine how heroic this ancient creature was when he was young. Now, the passage of time had left indelible marks on his body. King, the ancient creature that looked like a divine phoenix, respectfully retreated behind this figure. In this era where there are no sages, I didn't expect there to be such an oddball like you. This was a primordial king who was so powerful that no one could estimate his strength. In the past, he needed to be worshipped by all living beings, but now, he had appeared in the sky. You shouldn't have come into being. Chu Bei glanced at the primordial king indifferently. The other party was indeed very powerful and might have reached the Sage King realm. If this was in the past, he might only be able to use the rights to use a level 16 commodity. However, now that he had the power of a quasi-emperor given by the system, it was far from enough. We are the masters of this land, the primordial king said in a low voice. Clang! With a shout, A long spear made of black crystals appeared in the primordial king's hand. With a monstrous killing intent, it pierced towards Chu Bei. His movements were not very fast, but there was a heavenly Tao Saint sound. This is the resonance of the great Tao, the resonance of magic power through the universe. Fairy Rosy Cloud cried out in surprise. This was the Tao law of life-severing, something that only an ancient taboo existence could display. Throughout history, it had only appeared in legends. Today, she had actually seen it. The great Tao resonated, releasing countless strands. There were dragons leaping about, phoenixes flying about, divine sounds like blades, about to cut down all living things. However, all of this was just the accompanying heavenly Tao divine sound. The true killing move was still that black crystal divine spear. It instantly pierced through the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it pierced right before Chu Bei's forehead. It's a good thing that Boss Chu is here. It's too scary. This was the divine sense of all the cultivators here. This spear was accompanied by countless black threads. Each of them was a law, and each strand was sufficient to slay a supreme immortal. Countless strands gathered on the tip of the black spear, aiming for Chu Bei's forehead. From this, one could very well imagine how terrifying this attack was. Just this little bit of strength? You are too confident. Upon sensing the aura radiating from the black crystal divine spear, Chu Bei could determine his opponent's strength. First level Immortal Foundation, half-step Supreme Immortal. Second level Immortal Foundation, half-step Supreme Immortal. Third level Immortal Foundation, God King. Fourth level Immortal Foundation, half-saint. Fifth level Immortal Foundation, saint. Sixth level Immortal Foundation, Saint King. Seventh level Immortal Foundation, Great Sage. Eighth level Immortal Foundation, Half Emperor. Ninth level Immortal Foundation, Great Emperor. The strength of this primordial king was at the Saint King realm. The higher one's cultivation level, the greater the disparity between each level. This was especially so when one reached the Half Emperor realm. One's cultivation level could be divided into 9 levels. As the sound of his voice faded, Chu Bei acted. His right hand was like blue crystal jade, containing the soul-stirring sound of the great Tao. His eyes were boundlessly cold. 2 fingers stretched out, clamping down on the black crystal divine spear. As expected of Boss Chu, the spectators from afar all had excited looks on their faces. Such an attack from the primordial king was sufficient to destroy a sacred ground, causing the earth to cave in. But right now, it was actually clamped down by 2 fingers. No, impossible. With a world-shaking strike, the black crystal divine spear was stopped. That ancient life form that resembled a divine phoenix was instantly petrified. Its eyes were filled with shock, and it was so sluggish that it was like a piece of wood struck by lightning. Great sage of the human race. The primordial king stared at Chu Bei in astonishment, not daring to believe the scene before his eyes. His full-powered attack was so easily neutralized by Chu Bei. 2 fingers actually stopped his divine spear from advancing an inch. The black crystal divine spear was clearly only a finger's distance away from Qin Wentian's forehead. The heavenly Tao laws gushed in and out, intertwining with each other. As long as the black crystal divine spear pierced through, no matter how powerful it would still die. However, all the power of laws on the divine spear was suppressed, and it was difficult for it to advance an inch. Before he could recover from his shock, a surge of lightning energy surged towards him like a ferocious beast, suffocating him. At this moment, he knew that he had still underestimated the strength of this human in front of him. Feeling the terrifying force rushing towards him, the primordial king's black pupils shrank. He did not dare to hesitate and immediately pulled back his divine spear. With a violent shake, he stabbed towards Chu Bei from another angle. Pointless struggle. An indifferent voice sounded. This time, Chu Bei directly grabbed the divine spear with his palm, creating a string of sparks that destroyed a large area of space. Crack! Amidst the resplendent and dazzling lightning, Chu Bei exerted force with his right hand. With a crisp sound, the tip of the spear made of black divine crystal was broken. It was crushed into black fragments in his hand, sparkling and translucent. Seeing that his weapon was destroyed, the primordial king's pupils suddenly shrank, and a trace of fear emerged. However, before he could condense another attack, the human in front of him disappeared. Puff! Without a sound, Chu Bei arrived in front of the primordial king. His right hand clenched into a fist and directly cut into the primordial king's chest, penetrating it. Blood gushed out, and all kinds of organs flowed out. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. It was too fast, so fast that no one could react. The primordial king's expression suddenly twisted, and he roared. All kinds of St. Tao laws were released, but they could not stop the injury at all. The divine blood in his body was still gushing out. Miserable and painful howls echoed between heaven and earth. The primordial king struggled violently, his magic power overflowing into the sky. It was filled with the ancient king order, interweaving like divine chains. However, all his attacks towards Chu Bei were blocked by an invisible force, and he could not injure the other party at all. What was even more terrifying was that the power of chaos was spreading around his wound. Not only was it unable to heal the wound, but it also began to nibble away at his soul. Realizing this, the primordial king decisively abandoned his physical body. Divine light rushed into the sky from the top of his head as his soul escaped. Want to escape? Chu Bei spat out 2 mocking syllables from his mouth. As his voice fell, his left arm turned into a bolt of lightning, penetrating the top of the primordial ancestor king's head and soul body with a whoosh. Blood gushed out, and white brain matter splashed out. The primordial king's soul twisted and struggled before dissipating. One could vaguely see the unwillingness and regret in his eyes. Looking at this scene, Jiang Taishu took a deep breath. Among all the cultivators in the entire Big Dipper, perhaps only this boss Chu, who had survived from the primordial era, could kill a primordial king so easily. Casually waving away the primordial king's corpse, Chu Bei tilted his head and looked at the ancient life form that resembled a divine phoenix. Meeting Chu Bei's gaze, the ancient life form woke up and instinctively retreated with fear on his face. He never expected that this human in front of him would be so terrifying. Even the king of his race was not his opponent and had his soul pierced through. Don't. The ancient life form's voice was filled with fear. He wanted to escape, but this void was inexplicably confined by a terrifying force. He could not escape and could only watch as the figure that looked like a demon lord approached. With a shrill scream, a dazzling light lit up. When the light disappeared, only Chu Bei was left on the battlefield. The ancient life form that resembled a divine phoenix had been torn in half and held in his hand. The ancient emperor has awakened. No matter how strong you are, you will not have a good ending. The ancient life form that had been torn in half was trembling all over. Blood flowed and dyed the sky red, but he was still screaming. Chu Bei smiled. 2 beams of divine light shot out from his eyes and directly shattered the ancient life form's soul. Boss Chu is mighty. Looking at the 2 halves of the bird that Chu Bei casually threw in the sky, the spectating cultivators reacted. Someone was the first to exclaim. Then, cheers and clamors sounded throughout the entire area of the Jiang family of the ancients. It lasted for a long time. Boss Chu, the ancient emperor that it mentioned just now, don't worry. With me here, they can't do anything. Jiang Taishu came to Chu Bei with a worried look. However, before he could finish, Chu Bei waved his hand and interrupted him. The next day, oh no, hurry up and inform the abbot. The ancient life forms are here. They are really here. Oh my God, are these ancient warships the spatial equipment of the ancient life forms? Their aura is so terrifying. How many of them are there? It seems that a bloody battle is inevitable. If they want to fight, then let's fight. We swear to protect our home. The sky had just brightened, and the atmosphere in the western desert became heavy. Millions of monks looked up at the sky. They were all shocked, and the sea of reincarnation in their bodies shook. Rumble. In the sky, warships emerged from the void one after another, covering the sky of the western desert. In the Tempest Temple, several divine rainbows flew out and hovered in the air. They all looked serious. The people at the front were the abbot of the Tempest Temple, the abbot of the Allen Temple, the abbot of the Agama Temple, the abbot of the Shinkong Temple, and the abbot of the Lantua Temple. At this moment, above the head of the abbot of the Tempest Temple, a 1-meter-tall pagoda was floating. It had 7 floors and was made of stone, but it could suppress everything in the world. This was the weapon of a bodhisattva. Not only was the body of the pagoda made of earth-shattering immortal stone, which was a rare divine object, but the 7 sariras left behind by the bodhisattva were all sealed in the pagoda. 1 sarira was placed on each floor, making this 7-story pagoda an immortal sacred weapon. In terms of power, it was extremely terrifying. Not many weapons could compare to it. It was one of the supreme sacred objects of Buddhism since ancient times. Humans, I have given you a chance. Why are you still resisting? You are digging your own grave. Suddenly, a cold and gloomy voice floated in the sky. In the next moment, a terrifying aura rushed out from the largest ancient warship. It was as if it could penetrate the past, present, and future. It was as if a supreme existence was about to step into the sky. It was an immemorial king. His entire body was black. Every inch of his skin shone with black light, as if it was made of black crystals. He had 8 arms and looked like an 8-armed Buddha. The immemorial king stood at the bow of the ship. He walked very slowly. With every step, the void seemed to be fluctuating with him. His entire body seemed to be made of black gold, like an immortal god. Bang! This immemorial king was extremely powerful. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and slapped out. The Tempest Temple below instantly collapsed and turned into ruins. His cold eyes were filled with crazy killing intent. He was extremely cold. You evil creatures should be sent to the 18th level of hell. Seeing the destruction of the Tempest Temple, even the abbot who had always been merciful could not help but show a monstrous hatred on his face. Buzz! The 7-story pagoda above the head of the Tempest Temple emitted a dazzling golden light. Demonic runes soared into the sky. Beams of light that contained the meaning of heaven and earth pierced through the void and shot toward the immemorial king. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. In the face of the attack from the supreme weapon, the immemorial king was fearless. His 8 arms quickly interweaved a web of laws between heaven and earth to meet the attack. At the same time, he issued an order. Following the immemorial king's order, the hundreds and thousands of warships behind him shot out dense divine rainbows and charged toward the monks below with a monstrous aura. At a closer look among these divine rainbows, there were ferocious beasts that looked like bulls with lion heads and were covered in green scales. Some were like centipedes with silver wings. They were 5 meters long and as thick as an arm. Their bodies were shiny as if they were made of silver. Some were like white cranes, but their bodies were wrapped in blue flames. As they flapped their wings, billowing flames burned the void. Obviously, these were all terrifying creatures from the primordial era. Kill. Chase away these invaders. The roar shook the sky. Countless monks below rushed into the sky. Their faces were flushed red as they channeled the spiritual energy in their bodies with all their might. In an instant, the originally calm western desert became a noisy battlefield. The sounds of fighting continued for a long time, and all kinds of gorgeous lights shot into the sky. Chapter 307. At the same time, in Middle State. Similarly, thousands of ancient warships soared through the sky, releasing a monstrous aura that caused the void to sizzle. The huge Prodigy Manor had already turned into a wasteland that was too horrible to look at. One could vaguely see some flesh and bones below. Above the wasteland, for middle-aged men in dragon robes were glaring coldly at the ancient warships in front of them. These 4 were the Great Xia Emperor, Guhua Emperor, Ninli Emperor, and the Divine Prefecture Emperor. Behind the 4 emperors, there were close to 100 people in luxurious robes. Each of them had a powerful aura, and they were the leaders of their respective factions. In front of the Guhua Emperor, a set of golden battle armor appeared, shining brightly. It was in the form of a human, holding a golden sacred sword and carrying a golden divine bow on its back. It was actually alive. The peerless divine armor was sentient, and it was a legendary sacred weapon. It was made with divine items and could last forever. This was a flawless divine armor, as if it was a living ancient god. It made people feel reverence from the bottom of their hearts, and they couldn't help but want to kneel down. Your era has long passed. Do you want to start a war as soon as you appear? Must blood flow like a river? The Guhua Emperor slammed his palm into the void, and a huge, pitch-black, spatial crack instantly spread out from his palm. His face was filled with anger. I've already given you a chance. An emotionless voice came from the largest ancient warship. Immediately after, a tall and muscular figure appeared in everyone's sight. It had a head of thick golden hair and a pair of golden ancestral dragon horns. Other than the pair of dragon horns, it was no different from a human. The aura it released was incomparably terrifying, causing people to tremble. This was an existence that surpassed the saints, and its bloodline was noble. Even the four emperors couldn't help but want to kneel down. The powerful aura made every inch of their flesh and blood tremble, as if they wanted to worship a god. Such an existence was also a primordial king. The primordial king was cold and emotionless. As soon as it appeared, it raised its hand and slammed it toward the four emperors. Under this palm, the void collapsed, and dazzling laws of heaven and earth fell from the sky like a rainbow, suppressing the four emperors with a monstrous aura. Almost at the same time, thousands of primordial creatures on the ancient warships rushed down. If you want to fight, then fight. The Guhua monarch's eyes narrowed. He and the other three monarchs activated their golden battle suits at the same time and charged toward the primordial king. Let's fight to the end and not give up even an inch of land. The leaders of the various factions behind the four great emperors took the initiative to express their stance. Once they shouted, they all charged towards the sky. In the blink of an eye, the paradise on Earth had turned into a terrifying battlefield. Smoke and gunpowder filled the air. Northern plains. It was snowing all year round here. Originally, it was a picturesque scene of snow and ice blending together. But now, it had become a boundless battlefield filled with the sounds of battle, and the smell of blood pervaded the air. The palace master of the Ice God Palace, the Wang family of the remote antiquity, and the leader of the ancient giant race were working together to activate a monarch weapon, leading countless cultivators to fight against the ancient creature. This is a pointless struggle. A disdainful voice drifted through the ice and snow, bringing with it a monstrous aura that was extremely tyrannical. This was also a primordial king. He had a head of silver hair that reached his waist. His face seemed to be carved out of marble, sharp and clear, and snow-white like jade. There was a diamond-shaped white scale on his forehead that could faintly open and close. It contained a terrifying divine light that seemed to be able to pierce through the 6 realms and 3 realms. Just a strand of aura that leaked out was enough to make people unable to stand and fall to the ground. He was facing the 3 great cultivators and the monarch weapon alone. Not only was he not at a disadvantage, but he even had the upper hand. Every punch he threw out had a terrifying aura, like a heaven-shaking demon descending to the mortal world. Southern Mountains. This place was controlled by 3 major factions. One was the War God Hall, the largest human sect in the Southern Mountains. The second was the Demon King Hall, where the Southern Mountains demons were located. The third was the Barbarian Tribe, also known as the Barbarian War God Tribe. They were hidden from the world all year round, but were very powerful. At this moment, the 3 factions, which were originally like water and fire, were actually on the same side. The allied forces of the 3 factions were bathed in blood as they roared and fought fiercely with countless primordial creatures. All kinds of brilliant lights flashed as countless weapons soared into the sky. The continuous sounds of battle were mixed with miserable cries of pain. The War God Hall Master, the Fey Imperial Hall Master, and the Manchu tribe leader each held a supreme ancient treasure and stood in 3 different directions. The Fey Imperial ruler in the Fey Imperial Hall Master's hand was an extreme weapon that contained the might of a great emperor. You bunch of primordial creatures, why don't you recognize the current situation? Tens of thousands of years have passed. The Big Dipper is no longer the era when you ruled it, the Demon King Hall leader shouted in a deafening voice. A bunch of ants. How dare you be so arrogant? This was a creature with 6 wings on its back that was bathed in purple flames. After coldly glancing at the leaders of the 3 factions, it flapped its 6 wings and swept out a destructive aura. Unlike the fierce battles in the Western Desert, Zhengzhou, Northern Plains, and Nanling Mountains, the battle in the Eastern Wilderness was one-sided. To be exact, other than the primordial creatures, there was only one person participating in the battle in the Eastern Wilderness. The rest of the Eastern Wilderness cultivators were all spectators, more like spectators. However, even though there was only one person on the human side, the grass and trees in every corner of the Eastern Wilderness were not damaged at all. Rumble. In the distant sky, the slightly thin figure was like a demon god, like the ruler of heaven and earth. He stood in the void and inadvertently released a power that made people feel suffocated. They could not help but have the urge to worship him from the bottom of their hearts. Under his feet, a barrier made of intertwined divine light extended out endlessly, as if covering the entire Eastern Wilderness. It was like a boundary layer. Below it was the vast land of the Eastern Wasteland, and above it were the thousands of ancient warships that were invading the continent. The divine light barrier was indestructible. Even if the ancient warships bombarded it with all their might, they still could not break it. At this moment, Chu Bei was strolling in the void. With every step he took, a terrifying vision appeared behind him. In the vision, there was a giant palm that was tens of thousands of feet tall that looked for a warship nearby and slammed it down. Rumble. Every time the giant palm landed, an ancient warship that was releasing a terrifying aura would explode with a bang, turning into countless fragments that drifted in the sky. In just a few breaths, dozens of ancient warships were buried under the giant palm. Chu Bei turned into a beam of divine light. He seemed to have developed a sense of rhythm. His speed became faster and faster. Bang, bang, bang. After destroying dozens of ancient warships, he appeared above the largest copper warship. Rumble. Chu Bei arrived above the largest warship and clenched his right hand into a fist. It was simple and direct, carrying the power of a quasi-emperor as he punched out. Violent waves swept out, destroying everything in its path. The moment he punched, the tyrannical aura released by the warship was instantly annihilated. Then, as if it was imprisoned, it was dead silent. At this moment, an earth-shattering roar sounded from within the warship. A black figure broke free from its restraints and rushed out amidst the roar. It was also at this moment that Chu Bei's fist, which was wrapped in rainbow light, landed on the warship. There was a loud explosion, and countless fragments drifted in the air amidst the smell of blood and flesh, shooting across the sky into the distance. Great saint! How is this possible? How can a great saint appear in this era where even saints don't appear? No wonder Bai Luo and the Luo king came to the Eastern Wilderness, one after another, and never returned. It's you. It must be you. This was a primordial king with deer horns on his head and purple scales all over his body. Just looking at him made one shudder. In terms of aura, he was in no way weaker than the primordial king that Chu Bei had killed the day before. However, at this moment, this primordial king's face was filled with fear. He looked at Chu Bei with fear and frowned, vaguely regretting his actions. Eastern Wilderness, Western Desert, Northern Plains, Nanling, Middle Ground. Why did he choose the Eastern Wilderness that had a great saint overseeing it? You'll be able to see him soon. Chu Bei's lips curled into a faint smile as his calm voice drifted through the air. Damn it! Meeting Chu Bei's mocking gaze, a flame burned in the primordial king's eyes. Although he wanted to escape, he seemed to be locked down by an invisible force. This feeling was that if he dared to escape, that invisible force would instantly surge out and devour him. Since he couldn't escape, he could only fight. After making his decision, the primordial king roared. Then, his pupils constricted, his hair fluttered, and his body was filled with purple light. In the next moment, a purple ancient pagoda floated above the primordial king's head. Thunder rumbled in the sky as thousands of thick purple clouds descended. Kill. Facing a supreme saint-like existence, this primordial king didn't dare to underestimate him at all. He immediately used his strongest killing move. Tens of thousands of thick purple clouds gathered on the surface of his fist, and he charged directly at Chu Bei with an indomitable force. The sound of the fist was like a tsunami, vast and deafening. One after another, it was like a wave that swept through the 9 heavens. The endless rumbling made one's ears buzz. This was a huge fist force that was engraved with traces of Tao. It was densely intertwined and emitted a thunderous fluctuation. Purple clouds surged like a surging river, collapsing this side of the sky. Below the divine light barrier, Duanda, Yifan, Jizue, and the others watched without blinking. They were all focused. Is it another Saint King? Jiang Taishu's hair stood on end as he stared at the primordial king. The other party's punch shocked him. Fortunately, the one facing this punch was the supreme existence boss Chu. If it were him, he would have died under the power of the fist before the fist even arrived. In the sky, as the ruler, Chu Bei's expression didn't change in the slightest in the face of this destructive punch. No emotion could be seen on his face. He was still calm and composed. Seeing the fist coming, Chu Bei raised his right hand in a neither fast nor slow manner. A square seal of heaven and earth formed by interweaving divine light gushed out from his palm. As soon as the seal of heaven and earth appeared, there was an inexplicable light of Tao that spread in all directions. All the humans felt uneasy and their blood was boiling. It was as if a terrifying will had been poured into it. The moment it was formed, heaven and earth were in harmony. The vast great Tao rumbled and rumbled. Countless brilliant rays of light flowed out from the surface of Chu Bei's body, making him sacred and inviolable, solemn and grand. In an instant, Chu Bei seemed to have transformed into an emperor who ruled the world and looked down on all races. The great Tao was vast, and he was the only one who reigned supreme. The treasured seal flipped and flew, meeting the primordial king's world-destroying punch. Boom! Following a shocking explosion, purple gas surged and pierced through the 9 heavens. The primordial king roared as his hair stood on end. An ancient king vaguely appeared behind him. He seemed to have exhausted all his strength and even began to burn the blood essence in his body to release an even more surging divine power. As for Chu Bei, he looked much more relaxed. It was as if he didn't use much strength at all. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the ferocious primordial king who was using all his strength like an outsider watching a show. The corners of his mouth inadvertently curled into a mocking smile. Although Chu Bei didn't do anything, the seal that he had swung out earlier was releasing a dazzling light at this moment. It was as if it was going to crush the heavens. It was extremely terrifying. Crack. However, even though the primordial king burned his blood essence, he still only lasted for a few seconds before the purple ancient pagoda above his head broke into 2. Chapter 308. On the battlefield, the primordial king let out a shrill scream as the purple pagoda broke. Then, the seal approached the primordial king's body, and the majestic destructive power instantly exploded his body. The primordial king's soul immediately left his body, but before he could escape, the seal buzzed and directly swallowed him. Then, he turned into nothingness and dissipated. Rumble. After the primordial king was killed, all the ancient warships in the void vibrated at the same time, releasing a fearful aura. They wanted to escape, but the void seemed to be locked down. The ancient warships couldn't penetrate the void and come and go as they pleased. Since you're here, do you still want to leave? As his calm voice faded, Chu Bei raised his hand and pointed to the sky. His eyes narrowed. Suddenly, countless pitch-black gaps appeared in the distant sky. An incomparably huge light beam appeared from each gap. Some were black, some were purple, and some were blue. Several lifelike brontosaurus could be vaguely seen swimming in each light beam. Bang! 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 Chu Bei waved his sleeve, and countless light beams smashed down at the same time, accurately hitting the ancient warships. In the blink of an eye, half of the ancient warships arrived in eastern wilderness. At the same time, the giant palm in Chu Bei's avatar turned into a giant sword and directly swept out. Wherever the sword light passed, the ancient warships would be sliced into two halves and explode. In less than 3 minutes, the thousands of ancient warships that invaded eastern wilderness were all smashed into pieces. The pungent smell of blood filled the sky, and it was nauseating. Below the divine light barrier, all the eastern wilderness cultivators looked up at the scene in the sky in a daze. Even though the battle was over, they still hadn't recovered from the shock. Their burning gazes were fixed on the emperor-like figure. Their throats squirmed, and only worship and respect were left in their eyes. Is it over? Are all the invading primordial creatures dead? He killed all the primordial kings alone. Boss Chu is mighty and domineering. This crisis really came quickly and left even faster. Countless cultivators in the eastern wilderness looked at the distant sky in a daze. They were still in a daze. When they came back to their senses, they were all excited and in high spirits. Ever since the primeval king led countless ancient life forms to invade, they were already prepared to fight to the death in order to protect their homeland. But the result was that they didn't do anything from start to finish. They were just spectators. The godlike Boss Chu, who was like an ancient emperor, unleashed a barrier of divine light to protect them. Then, he unleashed a peerless mystique to kill the immemorial king first, then all of the invading immemorial creatures, leaving none alive. As expected of my faith, Ji Ziwa's eyes were filled with stars as she rubbed her fair hands excitedly. One day, I will also reach such heights, Yifan muttered as he looked at the figure in the sky. His eyes were filled with determination and yearning. I wonder how the other 4 regions are doing. Jiang Taishu heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that all of the invading enemies were destroyed. It was as if a huge rock had been lifted from his heart. As for the other 4 regions, although he missed them, he wouldn't ask for Chu Bei's help. After all, he didn't know what kind of person Chu Bei was. He was already very grateful that Chu Bei had protected the eastern wilderness. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Chu Bei stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. He glanced at the densely packed fragments of the battleships and waved his sleeve. With himself as the center, divine light spread out. In the buzzing sound, the fragments of the battleships disappeared along with the barrier of divine light. After a short while, everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Thank you, Boss Chu, for helping. As he walked, Chu Bei had already returned to Yifan and the others. Jiang Taishu, the Alcade Saint leader, the leader of the Ji family, and the other top cultivators of the Eastern Barren Territory immediately bowed respectfully. Rumble. The battle in the Western Desert was getting more and more intense. Bloody corpses, organs, and brains could be seen everywhere. The smell of blood in the air was nauseating. There were countless corpses of Western Desert monks and primordial beasts. It was a horrible sight. Kill. The roar was deafening. The sky, the land, the lake, and the forest were shining brightly. All kinds of weapons were flying, and countless Dharma runes were floating. At this moment, both the Western Desert monks and the primordial creatures had gone all out on the battlefield. They would not rest until one of them was dead. Damn it! Are all the primordial beasts so terrifying? Even the supreme weapons can't do anything to them. The great Thunderclap Temple Abbot, Allen Temple Abbot, Agon Temple Abbot, and the other abbots' Buddha aura shot into the sky. Their faces were extremely pale. Even though they worked together to activate the 7-story pagoda, they were still suppressed by the primordial beasts. It could be said that they were losing. Agon Temple Abbot, who was the weakest among them, spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. Why continue to struggle? Why don't you end your own life and save me the trouble? As the cold and gloomy voice rang out, the immemorial king, whose entire body was jet black, with every inch of his skin shining with a black light, and who had 8 arms like an 8-armed Buddha, punched the 7-floored pagoda again and again. Each of his punches seemed to carry the laws of the great Tao. With each punch, The void fluctuated as if an immortal god was bombarding the three realms. Bang! The primordial beast's attacks became fiercer and more powerful. Countless temples below collapsed in the aftermath, turning into ruins. Buzz, buzz. Under the primordial beast's continuous attacks, the abbot's aura began to become unstable. Finally, with a trembling sound, the seven-story pagoda was sent flying. Sacrifice my blood to the glazed pagoda. As the voice sounded, the great thunderclap temple abbot's blood gushed out of his body and rushed into the seven-story pagoda. In an instant, the seven-story pagoda seemed to have completely awakened, releasing an even more dazzling golden light. Blood-red demonic runes soared into the sky, and beams of light containing the great Tao of heaven and earth pierced through the void and shot toward the primordial beasts once again. As expected of the great emperor's weapon, sensing the terrifying aura of the seven-story pagoda, the primordial beasts only frowned slightly. They were still fearless. His 8 arms weaved a web of laws between heaven and earth and met the attack. Lawn, Suaw, Voidless, go to Eastern Wilderness, Northern Plains, Southern Ridge, and Middle Ground respectively and see how they're doing. If they still have strength, quickly ask them to come and help. The great thunderclap temple abbot burned his blood essence and looked at the 4 eminent monks who were fighting with the primordial beasts not far away. Yes, abbot. After receiving the order, the 4 eminent monks did not hesitate and immediately retreated from the battlefield. Northern Plains. Snow swirled in the air as ice and snow mixed together. The picturesque scene was completely gone, and only a bloody battlefield was left. It was like hell on earth. Icebergs collapsed, the ice plains shattered, and corpses were everywhere. Looking over, the original white was replaced by a horrifying blood-red color. The air was filled with a pungent smell of blood that was nauseating. The battle continued. Countless cultivators screamed and used all their strength. You bastards won't have a good ending. Looking at the blood-stained ice and the increasing number of human cultivators, the ice god palace master's eyes were bloodshot. She wanted nothing more than to tear the primordial beasts into pieces. The head of the Wang family of the ancients and the leader of the ancients' giant race also glared at the primordial beasts. Other than murderous intent, there was also unwillingness and helplessness in their eyes. This primordial beast was far more terrifying than they had imagined. Even if they used the great emperor's weapon together, they were still not his match. More terrifyingly, as time went on, the primordial beasts became fiercer and fiercer. The terrifying power in his body seemed to be continuously awakening. At first, they could still use the great emperor's weapon to stall the primordial beasts. But now, every punch the primordial beasts threw out was shocking. It was like a demon had descended. Southern Ridge. Damn it! Do you really want the barbarian race to die? The leader of the barbarian race was covered in blood. The red wounds on his body were shocking. He looked around at the countless corpses of his race and roared sorrowfully. The leader of the war god Hall and the leader of the Southern Ridge Yao race also looked at the figure not far away. The Shifter Emperor's ruler hovered in front of the leader of the Southern Ridge Yao race and buzzed with great emperor's might. A bunch of ants. Let's see how long you can last. The primordial king, who had 6 wings on his back and was bathed in purple flames, cast a cold glance at the tribe leader of the Berserker tribe, the temple master of war god Hall, and the tribe leader of the southern mountain demons. He flapped his 6 wings, and a destructive force swept out as he charged forward once again. Middle ground. Although it was not as one-sided as the Western Desert, Southern Ridge, and Northern Plains, it was still on the weaker side. Thousands of ancient warships soared through the sky, releasing a monstrous aura that caused the void to sizzle. Countless primordial creatures released sharp killing intent. They rushed up to kill anyone they saw. It was as if they had gone mad and didn't care about life or death. In this war, the originally prosperous middle ground had turned into a tragic ruin. Corpses and blood could be seen everywhere. While countless cultivators and primordial creatures were engaged in a bloody battle, in another part of the sky, the battle between 4 middle-aged men dressed in dragon robes and a primordial king had reached its climax. To be exact, the Great Xia Emperor, the Guhua Emperor, the Nineli Emperor, and the Divine Prefecture Emperor were jointly activating a human-shaped golden battlesuit to fight the Primordial King. The golden battlesuit held a golden sacred sword and carried a golden divine bow on its back. It was as if it was alive. Although the Primordial King was strong, the golden battlesuit was only slightly weaker than the former under the joint activation of the four emperors. It was barely able to hold on. I've underestimated your foundation. I'm sure the four of you are the strongest of the human race in this era. I didn't expect you to have such an extreme battle suit. This was a human-shaped primordial king with thick golden hair and a pair of golden ancestral dragon horns. After knocking back the golden battle suit with a punch, he looked at the four emperors mockingly. But how long can you guys last? The final outcome won't change. As soon as he finished speaking, the primordial king laughed without any scruples. The aura he released was incomparably terrifying and made people tremble. Then, he leaped past the golden battle suit and slapped the four emperors. The void collapsed. The dazzling laws of heaven and earth fell from the sky like a rainbow, suppressing the four emperors with a monstrous aura. Prepare to awaken the Lord Guardian. The Great Xia Emperor, the Guhua Emperor, the Nineli Emperor, and the Divine Prefecture Emperor looked at each other as if they had made an important decision. After the four emperors made their decision, their hands danced at the same time and quickly formed a strange seal. As the seal was formed, the energy in this world began to riot, accompanied by the strange sound of the great Tao. Chapter 309. Eastern Wilderness. Above a forest, a huge teleportation formation with a diameter of 100 meters lit up with a demonic light and dazzling runes. With a buzzing sound, a figure appeared in the teleportation formation. It was an eminent monk. He was wearing a slightly gorgeous kasaya, but there was an anxious look on his face. However, when he came out of the teleportation formation and saw everything around him, the anxious look on his face was instantly replaced by surprise and confusion. The mountain was still full of birds and flowers, clear spring water flowed, and lush trees rose from the ground. It was full of vitality. There was no killing, no roaring, no gorgeous light surging, no horrifying corpses, no ancient warships in the sky, and no countless Archean creatures or powerful Archean kings. Is this not the Eastern Wilderness? Or do the Archean creatures look down on the Eastern Wilderness? Alan's gaze swept the surroundings as she muttered with a puzzled look on her face. Logically speaking, even if the Eastern Wilderness resisted the attack of the Archean creatures, they would have to pay a heavy price. How could it be so normal? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Who are you? Just as Alan was confused, several ear-piercing sounds were heard, and at the same time, a shout echoed in his ears. A group of divine rainbows streaked across the sky and appeared around the teleportation formation in an instant. This teleportation formation was jointly guarded by the Yaoguang Sacred Ground, the Ji family of the Ancients, the Jade Lake Sacred Ground, and many other top forces. The first group to arrive was the patrol team from the Yaoguang Sacred Ground. Friends, I'm from the Western Desert. May I know if this place belongs to the Eastern Wilderness? Alan asked. Of course, this is the territory of the Yaoguang Sacred Ground, a patrol member said. Alan immediately asked, didn't the Archean creatures invade the Eastern Wilderness? They did, but they're all dead, a patrol member replied. What, dead? Alan's mouth opened wide in disbelief. He asked again, how many of them did they send? Were there Archean kings? Thousands of warships. Their auras are quite terrifying. Moreover, they were led by an Archean king. It's extremely terrifying, the patrol member said seriously. Then why did you still win? What about those warships? And those corpses? How did you deal with it? Alan Shea was completely confused. He stretched out his hand and pointed around. Since there was a big battle, why can't I find any traces of battle? In response to Alan's series of questions, the patrol members looked at each other and smiled. Then, they gave a brief description of Chu Bei's feat of single-handedly killing all the ancient creatures. Boss Chu, He single-handedly killed the primordial king and tens of thousands of primordial creatures. Could he be an ancient emperor? After listening to the patrol member, Alan was stunned, as if he could not believe his ears. It was as if he had been hit by a bolt from the blue, or as if someone had poured a basin of cold water on him from head to toe. His whole body was numb. After recovering from the shock, Alan suddenly revealed a look of joy and excitement. If what these patrol members said was true, that Boss Chu could single-handedly kill all the primordial creatures. As long as they could invite him, the Western Desert would be saved. Thinking of this, Alan looked at one of the patrol members excitedly and asked impatiently, "Fellow cultivators, the Western Desert has also been invaded by the primordial creatures. All the great masters are doing their best to kill the primordial king. Right now, the Western Desert has become a bloody battlefield. Perhaps only Boss Chu can save us. Please tell me, where's Boss Chu?" The Jiang family of the primordial era. After getting the answer, Alan thanked them profusely and turned into a divine rainbow, disappearing into the sky in an instant. "Who are you?" In the sky above the Jiang family, Jiang Taishu narrowed his eyes, and a terrifying aura shrouded the north. Feeling this tyrannical aura, Alan was shocked. Could the person in front of him be Boss Chu? Thinking of this, Alan immediately bowed to Jiang Taishu. Western Desert's Great Thunderclap Temple's first seat, Alan, greets Boss Chu. "The Western Desert is in danger. Please help us, Patriarch." Western Desert's Great Thunderclap Temple? Jiang Taishu looked sympathetic. He took a deep breath and said, "You're wrong. I'm not Boss Chu. As for the Western Desert's crisis, I'll ask Boss Chu for you. Let's make a trip." Before Jiang Taishu could do anything, a calm voice floated in the air. You're Boss Chu." Looking at the figure that appeared in front of him out of thin air, Senior Monk Alan's tongue trembled, and his face was full of surprise. Obviously, he did not expect that the person who could possibly be the great emperor of old was just a young man who looked to be in his 20s. Buddhists say that saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. Let's go to the Western Desert. As soon as Chu Bei finished speaking, he waved his sleeve. As the lightning dissipated, Yi Fan, Duanda, Ji Ziyue, Jiang Taishu, Alan, and the others disappeared from the sky above the Jiang residence. As time passed, the Western Desert's senior monks were defeated beyond recognition. Bloody skeletons could be seen everywhere. Organs and broken brains were everywhere, and the air was filled with the nauseating smell of blood. The senior monks, who were originally full of killing intent, gradually lost their battle intent. The current battle situation was irreversible. They could no longer defend the home that they had lived in for so many years. There were too many primordial creatures, and they were extremely powerful. Even the weakest primordial creature had the strength of a cultivator of the 4 extremities. In front of an absolute gap, even if you burn your blood essence, you can only buy some time. It can't change the outcome at all. In the battlefield, the primordial king's words were filled with mockery as he threw a few punches. Dong dong dong. The fist prince that carried the great Tao's order of heaven and earth kept bombarding the 7-story pagoda. Buzz buzz. The 7-story pagoda trembled and kept shooting out terrifying rune light beams. However, these light beams were no threat to the primordial king at all. Splat. Perhaps it was because he had been burning his blood essence for a long time, but the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot's body suddenly trembled. Then, he spat out several mouthfuls of blood. His face instantly turned pale, and his aura became violent. "Abbot, the northern plains can't even protect themselves. Their situation is similar to ours. They are in imminent danger." Monk Asuwa returned to the battlefield and started killing again with a look of despair. "Abbot, the southern mountains are in the same situation. Those demons can't even protect themselves." Monk Anan also returned to the battlefield and sounded helpless. "Although the Middle Continent's situation is better than ours, they are still at a disadvantage. The 4 empires don't have the strength to help us at all." Monk Awu's eyes were bloodshot as he shouted and charged toward a powerful primordial creature. It was as if he was bidding farewell to this world. The Western Desert is really doomed. Hearing the news brought back by Asuwa, Anan, and Awu, the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot suddenly laughed crazily. Then, he actually gave up on attacking and sat cross-legged on the ground. He spun the Buddha beads in his hand and began chanting scriptures. Seeing this, Als, Anyen Amushin, and the other abbots looked at each other and smiled. After sighing helplessly, they imitated the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot and sat cross-legged on the ground, chanting scriptures. Namo hi luo na, tua luo yi, polujia di, shua bo luo yi, namo cg di, amen yi. In the entire Western Desert, all the eminent monks gave up on fighting and sat cross-legged on the ground, chanting strange and difficult-to-understand scriptures. For a time, the entire Western Desert was filled with the sound of scriptures. Countless golden Buddhist words appeared in the sky. A bunch of old bald donkeys, so noisy. Kill them all. The primordial king picked his ears and impatiently gave the order. It was obvious that he hated the sound of scriptures. As soon as Cold in the forest shouted, he clenched his fists. The surrounding spiritual energy madly surged into the surface of his fists. The primordial law intertwined, and a terrifying aura surged out like a surging river. Rumble. However, just as the primordial king was about to kill the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot and the other abbots behind him, a huge gap suddenly appeared above his head. A deafening roar came from the gap. The sudden roar caused the primordial king's pupils to shrink. A chill inexplicably surged up his back. Perhaps out of instinct, the primordial king's fists, which had been accumulating power, changed the direction of his attack and hit the pitch-black gap. With another loud bang, a beam of purple light with a diameter of 1,000 feet shot out from the gap and instantly shattered the primordial king's fist. Then, in the midst of the soul-stirring roar, a 10,000 feet wide saber formed by intertwining divine light slowly emerged from the gap. The blade emitted a sky-blue light. The primordial king was dumbfounded. Before he could react, the 10,000 feet wide saber slashed down. It was unknown whether it was a saber gleam or lightning, but a terrifying linear light wave instantly pierced through the primordial king's glabella to his lower body. Whoosh! Almost instantly, the imposing primordial king's body exploded before he could even let out a miserable wail. The soul that had left the body looked at the 10,000 feet wide saber in horror. Just as he was about to escape, the saber slashed down again. First, it shackled the void. Then, in the blink of an eye, it directly shattered the primordial king's soul. What happened? The primordial king, he's dead? What's going on? The expressions of the primordial creatures nearby froze. They looked at the gap in the sky with a face full of fear, and their bodies began to tremble inexplicably. Rumble. The roar made one's heart tremble. The 10,000 feet wide saber crossed the sky and wantonly waved. Countless huge saber gleams formed by interweaving divine light swept across the sky. Wherever they passed, the void collapsed. The sound of metal mixed with the miserable wails of the primordial creatures. In less than 3 minutes, all the primordial creatures turned into piles of flesh and blood that scattered from the sky. The ancient warships that were originally intact were all turned into fragments and fell with a sizzling sound. Ever since the gap appeared, the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot, Als, Anyen Amushin, and the rest stopped chanting. When they saw the primordial king and thousands of primordial creatures die under the 10,000 feet wide saber, all of them fell into a daze. There was confusion in their daze. This change in the situation was too sudden, and they were caught off guard. They didn't even have time to think and react. A moment ago, the primordial king and primordial creatures that had invaded the Western Desert and wanted to kill all of them were all dead in the next moment, inexplicably dying under the 10,000 feet wide saber. It's the Buddha. It must be the Buddha showing his might. Yes, the Buddha heard our thoughts and sent down lightning punishment to punish this group of primordial creatures. It must be so. After the Western Desert monks came back to their senses, they prayed devoutly and bowed to the void. Bulsh asterisk T. What Buddha showing his spirit? If he can really show his spirit, why didn't he take action earlier? The one who saved you is Boss Chu. Remember, Boss Chu. However, just as the group of monks were chanting Buddha, Duanda's extremely furious roar exploded from the sky like rolling thunder. Hearing this, the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot and the rest all looked in the direction of the voice. It's Senior Brother Alan. Could it be that they are external aid that Senior Brother Alan invited? Who are they? Are they actually so powerful? That's a primordial king that even all the abbot and the glazed pagoda together couldn't deal with. The monks' gazes first landed on Senior Monk Alan, then instantly turned to Chu Bei, Duanda, Yifan, and the rest, sizing them up. Abbot, this is Boss Chu. He's the one who killed the primordial king and the primordial being. Alan was the first to land beside the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot. He pointed at Chu Bei with a respectful expression. Boss Chu? This Taoist name sounds familiar. Where have I heard it before? One of the abbot's eyes was filled with confusion as he muttered softly. At this moment, the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot had already arrived in front of Chu Bei. He put his palms together and bowed sincerely. Thank you, Boss Chu, for saving our lives. You're the savior of the Western Desert. All the monks of the Western Desert will never forget your kindness today. Ba, is he Boss Chu? Was the one who killed the primordial king and the primordial being's 10,000-foot-wide saber the one he used? What's his background? Is he more powerful than Buddha? Maybe he's an emperor of old. In an instant, the rescued monks of the Western Desert all discussed their savior, Boss Chu. All of them were guessing his identity. Get up. I can be considered to have a relationship with the Buddha. Since I'm here, I might as well help him. Chu Bei lifted the great Thunderclap Temple's abbot up. His expression was still that of an expert. Boss Chu, the southern mountains is also in danger. I'm afraid their current situation isn't better than ours. Monk Anan twirled the Buddha beads in his hand and bowed to Chu Bei. Boss Chu, you care about the world and are compassionate. Northern Plains is also being invaded by the primordial being and is in danger. Asua bowed respectfully to Chu Bei. Boss Chu, although Zhongzhou is in a better situation than us, they're still at a disadvantage. It's only a matter of time before they lose. Awu also took a step forward and gave a brief description of the situation in Zhongzhou. Then let's all make a trip. As soon as his indifferent voice fell, Chu Bei waved his sleeve. A red light flashed past. Other than the original group of people, he also brought along some of the abbot and disappeared. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.